Work session to order. Thank you everyone for being here. Ms. Tanner, please call the roll.
Yes, Basine?
Here.
Buffalo?
Here.
Campson?
Here.
Blanton?
Present.
Gabriel?
Present.
Jordan?
Here.
Martin?
Present. Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you for being patient with us as we went a little over on our governance training. First up, we have Dr. Pohl with the Family Life Education Plan Proposal update. Lots of words.
Yes.
All right.
How are you tonight?
Doing well. How about you guys?
Good.
All right. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Dr. Martin, Vice Chair, Ms. Buffalo, members of the board, and Dr. Birdsong. This afternoon, I'm here to share information related to the Family Life Education curriculum. Based on an amended Virginia Code in 1987, the Virginia Board of Education was to develop standards of learning for a comprehensive, sequential family life education curriculum. As a part of this code, each local board is required to approve curriculum changes and to review the curriculum at least once every 7 years. Additionally, parents and guardians have the right to excuse their child from part or all of family life instruction. Family life education is designed to promote the health and well-being of teens. According to data from the Virginia Department of Health, the teen pregnancy rate in Norfolk for 15 to 17-year-olds is 146% higher than the state average. Norfolk also has among the highest rates for all sexually transmitted disease in Virginia, and there are a high level of racial disparities for infant mortality, maternal mortality, and as mentioned, teen pregnancy and sexually transmitted infections. These data show a need for revisions to the NPS Family Life Education curriculum. A competitive grant funded by the Virginia Department of Health and Health Resources and Services Administration was awarded to the Eastern Virginia Medical School to implement a program to support effective family life education. Teen Health 360, program provided by the EVMS Pediatrics Department, aims to partner with local schools and community organizations, engage school-age youth and parents, provide medically accurate, age-appropriate, and evidence-based family life education, and to support comprehensive sex education to improve the health and well-being of school-age children. EVMS Teen 360 adopted the Get Real Comprehensive Sex Education That Works curriculum called Get Real. There are 9 middle school lessons and 11 high school lessons, and all of the lessons have extended activities for home discussion with parents and guardians. The Get Real curriculum addresses social and emotional learning, anatomy and physiology, as well as responsible and healthy decisions about relationships and health behaviors. During the remote learning periods of the pandemic, and as students re-entered schools, the VDOE recommended for family life education to be suspended during the 2019-20 and 2020-2021 school years. During this time, NPS partnered with the EVMS and offered voluntary opportunities for parents and guardians to participate in the EVMS Teen Health 360 program with the Get Real curriculum. Both middle school and high school students were offered the opportunity, and a total of 408 students participated over the 2 years using the parent opt-in form. 87% of the students who participated said they were glad they did and that they would recommend it to other students. 91% of the parents said they were very glad they registered their children and would recommend it to other families. Some of the comments in the additional comments section suggested that the program should be taught as a formal subject in all schools. Additionally, data collected by EVMS during the voluntary sessions indicated there were significant increases in knowledge from the pre to post assessments. The current middle school NPS Family Life curricula addresses all non-bolded items on this slide. With the use of the Get Real curriculum, the bold-faced items would be added to our curriculum. Similarly for this slide, this is the high school curriculum, and the current items are not in bold, and the new items are what are in bold. As with the requirements of Virginia Code, parents and guardians would still have the right to opt their children out of the program. With the recommended curriculum, there are opt-outs for each single lesson, giving parents and guardians choice in which lessons they would like for their children to participate, or they can choose to opt out of the entire program. In an effort to seek community input, the curriculum was available to review both online and with hard copies located at the Pretlow Jordan Newby, and Tucker Libraries. A survey was conducted that was advertised with paper copies at the curriculum sites, posted on social media, and with multiple calls and emails to parents. As of March 29th, there were only 98 responses. There were also 3 opportunities for in-person and online meetings provided, with only an attendance of 17 total attendees. With a quick review of the data received as of March 29th, this slide shows the breakdown of respondents, with the highest percentage being parents with children enrolled in an NPS high school. The vast majority of the respondents completed their own review of the curriculum online and then provided their input on the survey. And just over 80% of the respondents believe family life education is important, highly important. The majority of respondents indicated the Get Real curriculum was excellent at including topics that are appropriate for the grade level and that it addresses both physical and social and emotional needs. They also believe the resources were excellent at engaging students, age appropriate, and include current information. The majority also believe the strategies and activities are excellent for engaging students, providing opportunity for student collaboration and individual reflection. The respondents also noted strong support for terms that may be a part of discussion or the curriculum. There was also a question on support of specific topics being taught within family life education. 67 of the 98 respondents supported teaching all of the topics listed. The list of topics seen on the slide are specific ones that were identified that were not supported by the number of respondents next to each item. So in other words, 15 said they don't support the teaching of human sexuality. 9 said they didn't support media literacy and sexuality. However, please note that each of these topics listed are currently in our curriculum. 37 respondents left additional feedback on the survey, and of those comments, 20 were positive support of the content, 9 were opposed to the entire program, and the remaining comments had opposition to a specific topic or a couple topics. So the next steps are for the board to consider the adoption of the Get Real curriculum for family life education and NPS health courses in grades 6 through 10. Copies of the curriculum have been uploaded to board docs for your review, and at the desire of the board, a vote on April 19th, or we're ready to and prepared to offer additional community input meetings and to extend the survey window. At this time, I have Mr. Brady, our Executive Director of Curriculum Instruction, Mr. Derek Person, our Senior Coordinator of Health and Physical Education, as well as myself, standing ready to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Go ahead, Dr. Birdsong.
And to be clear, we are going to put it back out for more discussion.
Correct.
I need to make that clear.
Okay. Ms. Campson and then Ms. Vaccine.
I have to say I didn't realize that this had been removed from the elementary schools, but it sounds like it is.
The family life is still in the elementary schools. The only update to the curriculum we're looking at is in the secondary schools.
Secondary.
Correct.
Oh, okay. And I noticed my other question, so I see it already came up, is that the parents opt in, but, so in other words, they have to opt in to start instead of a thing where everybody's in and they opt out?
No, it is an opt-out still for
It is
family
still an
life.
opt-out.
Correct, it's an opt-out.
Thank you.
No problem, my pleasure.
Ms. Vaccine, go ahead.
Yes.
All right, thank you. Well, I want to commend the administration for bringing this forward. I think sexual health education should be rooted in scientific evidence and understanding public health principles and, of course, human rights. So I really am glad to see us updating or exploring how to update, the family life education curriculum. So I think it's really important. So I'll be honest that I too would like a little more time with the curriculum and to review it like a little more deeply, but so far I have gone through it and like what I've read, with the middle school and high school. So this is a 2008 curriculum, if I'm not mistaken, but it's been updated. Is that correct?
You mean our current curriculum or the Get Real curriculum?
The Get Real curriculum.
I'm not sure the exact publication date, but I know it's been updated when the EVMS partnered with the grant to look
Okay.
at the standards and everything else.
Okay. And because we have to review this every 7 years, so when the grant expires, what impact will that have on us?
So the grant really will provide us with the curriculum and the professional development. So really, just every 7 years, the law says we're supposed to bring it back to the board. And when we had researched in Mr. Person's career, it hadn't gone to the board, and with Ms. Rocket, it hadn't gone to the board, so we knew it was
Oh,
it
it
was
was
time.
way past due, yeah.
So in 7 years from now, we would just
Right.
see where we are and what may or may not need to be updated and bring that back to the board for further review and update.
Okay, all right, great. And just two more. So the demographic characteristics of those that participated in the pilot. So EVMS sought voluntary participants from from our students, I guess.
So during the 2 years where we weren't really, where VDOE recommended us not to allow it or not to teach it in our schools, we sought an arena to have it taught for parents who wanted their children to have the opportunity. So that's when we partnered, and then we sent information home with secondary students around this opportunity.
Okay.
And I'm not sure if they have the demographics on who participated in that or not. I can find out.
Okay, I'd be curious to know, and because also other high-risk populations, like our LGBTQ population and students with disabilities, if they actually, have broken that out, if they even know that, I don't know, but if they have that information, I don't know if that would be useful for us. And finally, my last thing, because I heard Dr. Birdsong say we're extending community input, I was going to recommend or ask if we could. So no vote on the 19th, correct?
That's
Okay.
Correct.
So the last thing is, has the SHAC reviewed the curriculum and provided any feedback or recommendation?
So it's been sent to SHAC for review, but they
Okay.
hadn't provided recommendations as of now, but it was sent prior to going out to public survey to the SHAC.
Okay, so I would like for the board to receive their feedback as well, or, their approval on it, or recommendations, or whatever. Just their feedback, since that's what they're there for. So I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Dr. Gabriel?
Sure, thank you. So Dr. Birdsong, would you be able to send us out a timeline as to the community, what other further community forums or survey, whatever else you're going to do as far as community outreach goes, and then when do you propose it coming back to the board for a vote, just so we can get a timeline?
So I can tell you ultimately that we want this to be back on the agenda in May during the
Okay.
business meeting for a vote with an update during the work session.
Okay.
So once it's been back out, Dr. Poole will come back with, more recommendations, hear feedback from SHAC, be able to provide you an update so that you're ready to vote in May.
Wonderful, thank you.
Hopefully ready to vote in May.
And if I may, we're already planning for at least 2 more in-person sites and to extend the survey and to have that information shared with our community by Friday before spring break.
That's right, that's right.
Okay, wow. All right, thank you.
Dr. Martin?
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Jordan.
Just want to, for my own clarity and maybe for the boards as well. So first, can you just clarify, I know you mentioned the 7-year evaluation period, and there's some maze in here and so forth. Is there a specific legal deadline that we have right now as far as adopting? I assume the recommendation from the administration at this point is for us to look at adopting this Teen Health 360 program.
Correct.
So is there a current legal requirement that we do that by a certain time period?
Well, legally, the board's supposed to review every 7 years, and we're not sure how long it's been. So I don't know that there's an exact deadline of when it has to be done, but we're definitely overdue for it.
Yeah, because I was looking at on that second bullet where it says, review at least once every 7 years, shall evaluate whether the curriculum reflects contemporary community standards, and then it says, and shall revise such curricula if necessary. So is it correct for me to think that the May timeline is with the expectation of us having this in place in time for the fall, but it's not necessarily some state directive? Is that
Correct.
fair? Okay. And on the second slide, well, I'm sorry, the third slide, where it addresses the teen health in Norfolk and the demographics, is that something that the administrative team put together? Did that come from EVMS,
It's
Public
from the
Health?
Virginia Department of Health.
Yeah, but I mean,
Oh.
you all put this in here as part of that, as part of the presentation for our awareness.
Correct.
So, can you describe, as you considered this data, were there any conversations around systemic issues that we have that contribute to this data? I mean, for me, having looked at different data sets over time, the racial disparities are often rooted in systemic racist policies and practices that we've had. And so I don't know I'm just trying to get a sense of any conversation around that, and to what extent the curriculum, because I started reading it but I haven't gotten through it all, also tries to educate around those systemic racial disparities and inequities, and
So
to what extent that can have impact on student outcomes.
So the curriculum doesn't go into necessarily the racial disparities. The reason we looked at the VDH data when we were even talking about revising the family life education curriculum. And, we brought this out just because we know a better, more inclusive curriculum of more in-depth topics would help with this data. And that was the reason for sharing the data, Mr. Jordan. It wasn't any more depth than that, really, just these are the facts of what we see in our wonderful city, and what can we do with our curriculum to strengthen it so that hopefully these numbers level out.
And just I appreciate the data, and I think it's something, and Ms. Bassim may be able to speak to it. I know she can speak to it better than I can, but I know maybe it was right as the pandemic hit, and the health department and some others was looking at some of this same data, and I remember we had some conversations around it. What I'm really just trying to get a sense of, is there other research that you may have looked at? For example, I've seen, and I don't know how recent it is, that there's been some data that I think was out of Louisiana. They did a study of teens, I think they did 15 to 19, on Medicaid, and they looked at black and white teens. And what they found when they looked at it on the income basis, that the rates were relatively the same based upon income on that particular study. And so I'd be curious as to what extent we've done any analysis around that. And I ask that for the purposes of, as you're doing further outreach and targeting, maybe you can describe some levels of intentionality of trying to reach target audiences that are dealing with the disparities that have been identified.
Sure. When we're there were a couple questions there. So we really didn't look at other states' data at this point, and we looked at the data that was available to us, which I don't think had the SES data included with it, Mr. Jordan. Okay. However, when we placed the curriculum in the libraries, we purposefully made sure there was one on the south side, there was one in the north. We hit every area. When we had our first sessions, we had one that was online. We had one all the way up at Pretlow. We had another one at bowling, and with planning more, we're planning one for the south and one for the east and one for the west to make sure that we really hit all areas of the city. And this time, we've also talked about with our sixth through ninth graders and maybe fifth graders as well, sending information home with the students as well as the call and the email to try to even get a bigger response.
Yeah, because if you get a chance to go back and look at some of that VDH data, and I know they shared a presentation with us, and I know they shared one with council, a lot of that disparity is concentrated. And so trying to do some additional outreach where it's concentrated, I don't know if we're leveraging like Teams with a Purpose and others that we could leverage their support. And then my last comment for now is feedback that I've gotten from parents, because I didn't know this was going on. I just started getting these phone calls and emails and text messages. Many of the parents I was hearing from, they felt blindsided by it, about some of the level of the content, especially middle school. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know if there's some way to tease more of that out, whether it's in surveys or engagement. But yeah, I definitely heard big concerns about not so much the awareness and the preventative efforts, but I think, as was described to me by a couple of people, the self-actualization piece, and so there's a lot of feedback that I got there, and I just want to make sure that we are providing safe spaces for those families and parents who have strong feelings about that part of the program, that we welcome their voices.
Absolutely. And that was one of the other things going into this. We knew we wanted to have a lesson by lesson opt-out. So if there were certain parts of the lesson, there's an opt-out for that part of the lesson, and not just an I'm out or I'm in process. So that we've actually already formulated letters for each and every lesson, detailing what's in there, so the parents have that opportunity too, to try to make sure that they have that opportunity.
Ms.
Thank you.
Vestine, go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry, are you done?
I was just
Mr.
saying
Jordan?
thank you.
Okay. Go,
I
Ms.
just have
Vestine.
a follow-up. So what happens when a child is, or a parent opts their student out? Because one parent did share a concern about their child being ostracized or isolated, and they didn't want that feeling. So now I thought about it, I really don't know what happens to the children who are opted out, who opt out of the lessons. So what is, for those of you, that know, what is that? Can you share with us what that looks like?
So the opt-out would be, they would be given an alternative health assignment.
Okay.
And generally, they would go to the library or a different area, because they can't be in their,
Well,
can't
that
say
I
go
know.
in the corner, but.
Right, that's obvious,
Yeah.
but I didn't know.
Yeah, so they would have a
what-
different health lesson,
Okay.
and they would be in a different part of the building with supervision.
And usually it would be in small groups, so the kids wouldn't feel ostracized. So they
Okay.
could be with other students whose parents opted them out, or in another learning environment, but in a smaller group.
Okay,
We
all
wouldn't
right.
say you go sit over
That's
there because
helpful.
your parents don't want you involved.
All right.
We certainly
Okay,
don't
well,
do
that's
that.
helpful for me to
Yeah.
explain that if a parent asks me about that.
We're
Okay.
very sensitive to
Go
that.
ahead, Ms. Campson.
Oh, yeah, I just wanted to add, that was my job when this all came on board, and as the reading specialist at that time, and it was my responsibility, first of all, it's hard to keep track. They were doing lessons out then too, and this is at the elementary level, so it wasn't, but then they're all, that may have been all they were doing, and I only paid attention because I was an elementary person, and it was for elementary. But that's what I did. I had it in things, and then I would often get a helper too, so we could split the kids up into their little groups, because we had, I think we might have still been, no, I think sixth grade was already moved out. So we had those, and we were able to do them by grade levels, and we just had to keep track to make sure we were true to what the parents wanted. That was a big deal, that we made sure, because sometimes with just the lessons only, you had to be really on top of it. But it was pretty comprehensive. We planned out what we were doing ahead and ran, because it would change from week to week, depending on the opt-outs and the opt-ins.
Right.
So, but they were definitely taken care of. We didn't just leave them sitting around not doing anything.
Go ahead.
Just a couple of things, Dr. Pope. Please share with the board what's been done to put the information out, so parents are aware, and what, if they haven't been aware, where can they access the information so they can provide feedback? And also, kind of around Mr. Jordan's point, don't want to speak for Mr. Jordan, but do you have the data point around, for example, Caucasian teens in Norfolk? What is their percentage of pregnancy? Is it above the state level or below? Do we know that?
I don't have that in front of me at this point. Just the overall rate of all of our teens, 15 to 17, is 146% higher for all of our teens. But then just the African American is 56% higher than the state average.
Is the Caucasian rate higher than the state average?
I believe it is. I don't have the rate in front of me. I think all of our teens are higher than the state average, but African Americans were the highest above it. But I'll have those numbers.
Yeah, I would bring that back,
I
just
will.
to your point, Mr. Jordan.
Yeah.
I think I heard what you were asking.
Yes, thank you.
And then as far as the other question, we sent the initial email and call out on March 17th, advertising the 3 meetings, and the survey was open. Did another email and call on March 24th. We posted on social media on the 21st, the 23rd, the 25th, and the 27th. We'll redo that, of course, and we'll have more direct links. I know there was some confusion to get to the curriculum as far as where it was, and the original email had some links in it, and somehow they didn't get included in the email out. So we'll make sure the link to the survey and the curriculum are in the actual email that go out to the parents too, for easeability of access.
Okay.
This is a request for your consideration, not a directive. But we've talked about it before. To the extent that that you're able to capture demographic data in your survey, it would be helpful to me to see who's responding and based upon who we're targeting. I think Mr. Clanton has suggested a couple of times, I guess through the system, there's still text messaging, but different communities respond to different things in different ways. And so just if you all would just take another look at all the different techniques, and if you send it to us, I'm sure we all have ways of reaching folks as well. And then the last favor is in part to the board and to the administration. If we can look at any research that ties literacy and numeracy rates of children and teen births. I know maybe a decade ago there was some research done around that, and the Brookings Institute did a partnership with the NAACP on a new index that's out that shows the impact on numeracy in terms of African American quality of life. But I would, in addition to what we're educating here, if there's something that shows that children who do better with literacy and numeracy as a result of awareness and confidence and so forth, have lower pregnancy rates and lower other negative, well, I won't say negatives, but other indicators that we have up there, that would be very helpful.
So just a clarifying question, Mr. Jordan, I just want to make sure I heard you correctly. So research around students who were born to teen parents and their productivity?
No, I'll look it up and I'll send if folks are willing to research it, but I thought I saw some research that's been done that shows that the better children do in school in their literacy and numeracy results that those that do well have lower instances of what we're
Of
talking
becoming
about.
pregnant.
Yes.
So the reverse of what I said. So those who are higher achievers in literacy and numeracy,
Right. Have
research saying they have lower
lower instances.
instances of, okay,
Yeah.
I'll see what we can find.
Yeah. We can assume that, Mr. Jordan. I mean,
Well, I don't- I
based
just-
on, what, just generally in research as you're looking at, generally the children whose parents or teenagers have access to, they don't have as much access to resources as parents who likely are more educated and have access to resources, so we can probably generalize, but I can't quote
Yeah.
you the name of a researcher, but I can,
There's a lot out
it's,
there.
it's unlikely that they have a higher literacy or numeracy rate than children whose parents are not teenagers and better educated,
but
et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, right. I agree with that, but I'm saying just on the students themselves, and the reason I'm raising that is, in addition to whatever we may do in terms of family life, if we know that there's a group that we're trying to provide supports, then maybe we may provide additional supports when it comes to literacy and numeracy, in addition to whatever we may do as far as family life education is concerned. That's where I was trying to get a feeling for that.
Okay, any other questions? Good. Okay. All right, thank you, Dr. Pohl. Up next, we have item 3.02, Career and Technical Education Plan Proposal for School Year 2024. And we have Ms. Goshen presenting. Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening, Dr. Martin, Mrs. Buffalo, school board members, and Dr. Superintendent. Listen to that.
Super
Super Superintendent, Dr. Birdsong. Thank you so much for the opportunity to briefly give you an overview of the Perkins Plan for school year 2023-2024. As shared with you in previous years, Perkins 4 covers, along with other grant opportunities, all of the K-12, 5 through 12 students who are enrolled in career and technical education. The purpose is to really work with students to develop fully their academic knowledge, technical knowledge, and employability skills. When you look at what I have on the screen, it gives you a good idea of the slices of the pie in terms of work-based learning, technical education, and academic instruction, all ensuring that we are feeding the needs of the whole student and not just fragmented segments of that. When you take a look at the high-quality programs that each student will be available to, we have work-based learning, career and technical education, industry credentialing, and a whole host of other things. Understanding that this program does not work in isolation, so a student would not be enrolled in something with work-based learning or industry credentials. When we talk about a comprehensive program, we make available to all of our students all of these things are here. Now, when you talk about Perkins in and of itself, you're referencing only grades 5 through 12. Up until about 3 years ago, it was grades 6 through 12. Now they've moved down into elementary, 5 through 12. When you look at what's available in terms of cluster and instruction, we have all of these clusters available for our students, along with pathways that feed into those clusters and courses. We make sure that there's equitable distribution of courses available at our middle and high school classes. When you look at elementary, which would be grade 5 for us, there's only one course, Career Connection. However, we make available the activities that will allow for students to participate. So you have courses for grade 5, then you have 6 through 8, which 6 through 8 also will have high school credit-bearing courses. And then, of course, you have grades 9 through 12, and you have the Norfolk Technical Center. Courses are also available at our auxiliary sites, Open Campus, Madison Career Center, as well as our students who are in virtual school. They take that through Virtual Virginia, and then students who may be at the a detention center are also availed some opportunities to take different courses. When you look at the coursework, we want to make sure you understand there's a huge couple of cogwheels that go together. So career and technical education student organizations not only take into the co-curricular aspects, but here's where your competitions will fall, your leadership conferences and things of that nature. For example, if you look at HOSA, those are your health and medical sciences students. A couple of weeks ago, they all presented and they competed on the state level and now placed, I think it was 1, 2, and 3. That group will now move on to the national level of competition. The same thing goes for all of the others. If you look at TSA, that gives you an idea. It's Technical Student Organization. Skills USA normally goes with your trades and industrial, your welding, your auto, carpentry, things of that nature. DECA would be aligned with your marketing students. And FCCLA, everybody loves those because that's where you get to eat. That's your culinary, early childhood education. And so we want to make sure there's a co-curricular and not an extracurricular. So sometimes things are pushed into the courses versus just after school. Students during this time of year, they do a lot of traveling, and this is where things get a little nervous for me because I feel like they're my children. So when you have a group in California and a group in Florida and a group in Georgia, I do not rest very well until everybody's back home with their own parent, so I don't have to worry. But normally our children do very well. Also, a major aspect of what a CTE student will encounter is credentialing. And this is just a snapshot. In the state of Virginia, there are 300 approved credentials a student can take. Keeping in mind the majority of these are high school or higher. Many of them are adult level credentials that student will take. However, there are some assessments that are geared specifically for high school students. This just gives you a sampling of what our students have to take, and it is not one that you must take this one or that one. They are all aligned with a program that a student may happen to be in. So if I'm in nursing, I would take an NCLEX PN. If I am doing culinary, I would do ServSafe or ProStart. Engineering, I would do something like AutoCAD, and then some of the new ones that are going into aviation and aerospace, they would go under the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration. When you look at a snapshot of how we are doing now, we're looking from 2018 until now. So if you look at 2018, 2019, we had about 3,000 or more credentials achieved during a school year. That's grades 9 through 12. Some students may be in their second year, some may be in their first year. When we went into the pandemic, our year was cut in half and we only had earned 801 because we stopped on March 20th. Spring testing is April and May. When we came back, remember we had been out for about 18 months or so. We had 1,134 credentials earned. That's because there were so many waivers that were done, so we didn't test as much. We got back in April. Some testing vendors did not allow us to test virtually, and students could not test at home, and we were still in a remote learning. This year, we're getting back into full swing. In spring of 2022, there were 2,392 credentials earned. And you say, well, how does that go along with what was tested? So we tested about a smaller number than ever. We only tested 3,000. We only administered 3,052 tests, of which 2,392 were earned. So that's about 78%. We normally are working to get higher than that. Again, that's grades 9 through 12. Our sophomores, juniors, and seniors fare better because they would be in their second year of a program versus someone who would be in their first. When you take a look at this next slide, it gives you a different perspective. We're talking about CTE completers. That would be an individual who has spent 2 or more years within a CTE sequence, as well as meeting all graduation requirements for a diploma and earning a post-secondary credential. So about 90% of our students last year that graduated who completed a sequence they earned a credential. And you can see the years before, we were at 68% because those are the students who would have been in the virtual setting. And also, the last 2 years, the state allowed several waivers. And you know, high school kids, just like we adults, if we don't have to do it, we may not do it. But the state did give everyone in the state some waivers. And so we picked up last year, and we're back right where we were. This is very good for our students because that helps them as they transition into whatever post-secondary endeavor they may choose. It could be military, world of work, college, higher ed. It could be a trade school, an apprenticeship program. They all may vary. When you look at that cogwheel that I spoke earlier of turning, also work-based learning is a huge part of it. Sit and get is not great for students, and we all know that. What they learn, we have to teach them how to synthesize it and put it into the world of work. That's where work-based learning come in. In this flywheel ahead, you see that these are all the ones that we currently offer. Last year, we had over 450 students participate in work-based learning, and that excludes service learning. We excluded service learning because now we've moved that into English as well as government in collaboration with CNI, who've done a wonderful job. So all students will participate in that. I removed that number, and I wanted to give you the 450. So those who are in mentorship or co-op or clinicals, then you get a good idea. When you think of clinicals, those are your health and medical students, and these are age appropriate, grade appropriate. So if you're seeing cooperative education, that would not be your younger students. We really align it with their program of study, age, and level of maturity. Here are two examples of work-based learning. The first flyer, the work-based learning summer program. We partner each summer with the City of Norfolk and Hampton Roads Workforce Council to ensure that our students receive paid internships during the summer, and it extends into the school year. They participate in an on-board training for 3 days in which they're paid, and then they are matched with businesses throughout the area, mainly in Norfolk and maybe out a little bit outside, where they work during the summer up to 180 hours. Last year, they were all paid $14 an hour. We're shooting for that or even higher this year. The internships have been wonderful because you name it, the students have learned. One thing we did find, it did more than expose them to just CTE, it exposed them to life. One young lady came back and she worked at Nauticus and she met just a plethora of individuals from around the country, around the world. And as she got to know them, she really started to learn that, hey, I would like to travel. But and one thing she did learn, she was very honest, she said, I had never heard of a passport. I didn't realize that I needed a passport. So we matched her up with someone, and she went through the process of getting a passport. You would have thought she had won the lottery. When she came in, she was all excited, and so all the individuals she met, she said she met someone from Germany, she'd like to travel there. She met individuals from different parts of our states, the Caribbean states, and now she's excited about traveling. So not only does the internship give you real life experience for work, it's life in it of themselves. You watch and you see them grow over the summer. The ones that you start in with June are very different when you get them in August, and they've experienced learning how to open an account, making sure certain things do not bounce. When you use that debit card, yes, it takes money from your account. It's not magical. The money's just not there. It comes from your account. So they learned a lot about taxes and things of that nature. Also getting to work on time. The second one gives you an idea of a mentorship program. We have a lot of students that they refer to non-traditional students. These are individuals by gender that would like to go into a field that's normally where they're in the minority, where 25% or less happen to be of your gender. So we have sought out different individuals in a field that can serve as mentors. So if it's a welding young lady, then you match them with someone in welding. If it's a young man in a field where he is non-traditional, then we match them. That gives them a chance to get to know someone who has taken their journey so they can be comfortable and know how to network and really maneuver what is needed to be successful in a non-traditional career. When you look at how do we do different things for our students once they graduate, this year we're doing our first annual Hire Our Grad event in collaboration with the City of Norfolk and the Hampton Roads Workforce Council. We have invited businesses to come in on May 16th, and they will be screened prior, so there's a vetting that's going on now. And it's not a career fair or a recruitment fair. It is a hiring event where students who have completed a CTE program or others will have an opportunity to interview with a business that they would like to go into. The goal is to have all folks hired before June 6th because we're doing a signing event at the Slover Library. So any student that was hired at the Hire Grad event will now be able to do a signing day, just as we do with the athletes, with their business. So if the business has hired them and it's Newport News Weldon or Norfolk Chip or somewhere, then they either get the shirt, the hat, the pin, or whatever, and then we invite their parents, and they get to sign their name on the dotted line. We're really looking for businesses that will work with our students in terms of higher skilled, higher wage, and in-demand skills. It may say on the flyer a target of $15 an hour. That is not our limit, but we want to make sure that our students are going into the right field and that their skills are being properly compensated and that they're in businesses that are really into growing our students. So again, May 16th and June 6th for that. Looking ahead on what's going on, I just talked about the Hiring Our Grads and Signing event. We will be implementing the Youth Registered Apprenticeship Program. We will also work hard to collaborate with companies, businesses, universities, and the state to kick off a teacher apprenticeship program. With the teacher shortage being what it is, we have to really look at how we recruit differently, really looking at teachers who may have left the field in a different content area but will be willing to come back in CTE, growing your own in terms of finding individuals coming out of college, but also high school students who are interested in. Now, they'll be a little bit longer off, but we want to make sure that we are looking at every corner, leaving no stone unturned. We will have the 5th grade elementary, national accreditation for our pharmacy and culinary program. We spoke previously in last year about each program we want national accreditation. So these are the 2 we are pursuing next year. We're kicking off an aviation and aerospace program. Governor Health Science Academy, that is still the application process, but I didn't want you to think we forgot about it last year. You had to go through the intent phase, the committee phase, so we are moving along the phases, and I must say they are many. But it is a labor of love, so there are no complaints coming from me or anyone else. We are also moving into the candidacy phase of IB career programming. We've been awarded and participated in the Maritime Trades Magnet Program, where we have been given an opportunity to be the recipient of higher aged, higher tech equipment for students. So now we get to do more robotic arms, and we received that from ODU and VMAS. Expanding CTE dual enrollment and really kicking off the middle school Go Tech program. The Maritime Trades program is for high school, so that equipment is going to high school. Middle school tech allows us to redo the tech ed labs at our middle school one at a time. And so it will mirror what we would like to call an innovation lab, but it will not be as large as the high school ones because there are some level of equipment that cannot be used at the middle school. So that gives you a look at the road ahead for us. And with Perkins, each year we get an allocation of which we have to tell the state how it will be spent. At this time, no state has received their allocation, so we have been asked to use the allocation from last year, and so before you is our budget. We normally, as in every year, equipment and technology takes up about 57%. It costs a lot to run a CTE program. You have personal services, and no, that's not personnel. Everybody thinks it's a typo inside of Perkins. It's personal services. That is anything that you pay for part-time. We only have one position inside of Perkins, and that's for work-based learning. With that being a graduation requirement, we must have someone supporting schools and making sure our students are connected to real-life learning. We have contracted services. That's for your competitions, any type of credential testing, professional development for teachers, and that's what makes up our Perkins grant. So you can see the slice of the pie actually represents how the money is spent each year. The only changes that would come across is once our allocation for this year is received, the numbers may change, but the percentage of the pie will remain the same. And last but not least, any questions or discussion that you'd like to have, I stand ready.
Mr. Clanton, go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Martin. I just want to first start off by commending you, Ms. Goshen, and your team for what you presented here today. You know, this has always been one of my passionate topics every year, but I know that Dr. Martin and myself actually had an opportunity to see, and Ms. Camps and myself, maybe about a month ago, took a tour of the technical center to see what was happening there and know about some of the new labs. In regards to what you presented here today, it's always been my, it's been kind of my cheering thing I've been saying about more students to have the opportunity. And so when I was looking at your numbers here, and you had 97.83% of those who, I guess, got their diploma, got their certification,
Yes.
the recognized post-secondary, is that, I see a percentage, but what's the actual like number of students?
So-
Is that what's on the other side?
No, so take, for example, I want to make sure I'm at the correct slide. You're
Yeah, uh-huh.
referencing the completers?
The
Okay,
completers, yeah.
so take, for example, we had about 1,632 students that graduated last year. You're looking at about 950 of those students are considered CTE completers. About 800 plus, maybe 848 of those students were not only completers, but they also earned a credential.
Got it. That's what I wanted to,
Yes.
to kind of drill down
And the
into.
same thing goes for the years before it.
Because that kind of leads into my next thing there, is making sure that we're doing everything we possibly can. And I know we're expanding to looking at how we actually offer the instruction, working with new curriculum, and even just lesson planning, so that your core curricular teachers are being able to work with your CTE teachers
Absolutely.
to really help make sure that the lessons and that what the students are there is relevant. And, you know, I know it's different for all of us at different pieces at times that, you know, I went to school because my mama told me I had to go to school, and I was sitting in the geometry class because I was going to sit in the geometry class, though I was interested in music and all these other things like that, but why am I sitting in this geometry class? But making sure that there are things that are relevant to students so that they understand. So if they're doing the criminal justice, which I follow the criminal justice team on IG, and I just love all the stuff that they're doing. But just really trying to make that a concerted effort. And I know that many different school divisions have done some other things and some other models, like I've been really pushing about more career academies. But that kind of leads into the other piece. We know that there's a finite amount of dollars with Perkins to be able to do these things. And so we're doing a application, which has been the system forever in middle school and in high school, making sure that each one of these schools have those things, and they're all based on their attendance and so forth. But I know as we as a board begin to move into our educational planning discussion and looking at what that looks like, you know, looking at attendance boundaries, do we keep boundaries? I mean, there's a whole plethora of different things that are there. I think what I'm being able to see here is that we have a little bit more flexibility in how we're doing that, and that you've identified a way that students are leaving outside of Norfolk Public Schools. And I want anybody who's watching that, based on the numbers that you gave us here today, that our students are truly being prepared not only for life, career, and whether or not they want to go directly into the workforce, they want to continue a 2 or 4 year degree, or they want to go into the military. That those options are there, and I think that that's the consistent thing that goes back to how we market Norfolk Public Schools and what we're doing. That our students, we have great graduates that are coming here, and this is why people want to send their students and their children to public schools. You don't have to go to get a private education to receive some of the very best opportunities to ensure that your child will be successful. So I'm happy to hear this. I'm happy to hear about the aviation program. I actually want a chance to go tour their site over there. For those who know, in my current role, I'm working with workforce, and so it's really exciting to see the opportunities that are being here and that you all are putting on the forefront. So I just will end it with saying I commend you. I commend the team that's happening there. Thank you, Dr. Birdsong, and your team. And I know that as we continue our educational planning, and I implore to my colleagues that we keep this in mind. How do we change and turn the head on how we provide education so that it includes something that our students will be excited about and that they can see the end goal in mind, that we are truly trying to prepare them for the world. Thank you.
But thank you for your support and the support of the board. That makes the difference because we would not be able to accomplish any of this without the leadership and the support, so.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Any other questions? Go ahead, Ms. Buffalo.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Love the presentation. Workforce development is also a passion of mine as well, because I said not all kids are going to college, so how do we prepare them for the workforce or some other alternative post-graduation? So I'm so excited about the Hire Our Grad event. I think that's a good thing. And so I want to make sure I have the right date because I would like to be there. June 6th is what I heard.
The signing
And
day.
May
The signing
16th
date.
is the Hire Our Grad event. June 6th is the signing day.
I want to be at both
And
of
the
those.
location is the Norfolk Technical Center. We decided to start a little smaller, start at home, and then spread abroad. So this time next year, we will need a larger event. But right now, we're going to get it right. And of course, everyone is invited to participate. In terms of vetting, we're vetting the businesses, but you
Right.
all are more than welcome to attend.
Yeah, we have I'm glad to hear different businesses and those partnership, workforce development partnerships. So thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
Send those dates to the entire board.
Okay.
Yes, I believe they're trying to do invitations and all of that. Mhm.
Thanks. Go ahead, Mr. Jordan.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. I'd like to start by asking if you will send back to the Norfolk Technical Center family. I had the opportunity to do mock interviews again this year, and really appreciated the opportunity to do that and that initiative, and being able to hear from the talented students and be reminded of some students who have long since graduated but come back and take nursing and childhood education and other at Norfolk Technical Center. So I always appreciate that. Two questions on the maritime trade magnet. Is that magnet as in magnet school? Can you explain that magnet a little bit?
That's the name of the grant with
Okay,
Old
that's just the
Dominion
grant.
University and
Okay.
VMass. They call it the Magnet Trades Magnet because they are really working with a group of businesses to really move forward the maritime trades, manufacturing, advanced manufacturing.
Okay,
So it's not a magnet
It's
school.
magnet in terms of attracting.
Yes,
Okay.
it's attracting individuals to a particular field. Right now, the innovation lab for that will be at the Norfolk Technical Center, open to all students. When I say they donated a lot of things, sometimes I think there were about 10, 12 3D printers. We had CNC milling machines, Raspberry Pis, you name, laser cutters, robotic arms. So it is really taking what our students will be able to do to a much higher level. And so because we do not wish for it to only start at grade 9, that's why we signed on to be part of the GoTech program. So now you have the students who are in the earlier grades being exposed to that. So when they arrive in 9th grade, a robotic arm is second nature to them and not seeing it for the first time.
And just a couple of things for the board and Dr. Birdsong. In the strategic plan monitoring tables, when we were having the discussions about monitoring around credentials and AP and IB, I know we ordered them, so we were looking at the percentage of students that could achieve one of, so it was an or, and I would like for the administration to have some thought, and maybe it could be part of the Perkins presentation next year, just kind of highlighting goals, SMART goals around just the industry certifications as it ties to the data that we're seeing in this presentation. And
Great thing about that, we've kicked off, that is under number 1, student excellence.
Right.
I believe it's objective 3,
Yeah.
possibly. And so we meet and take a look at how everything we do is aligned with the strategic plan, because
Right.
it has to make sense for everyone, and we're all speaking from the same book.
Yeah, and I think that's great. I just was suggesting that at a board, whether it's once a year at this time, that we also be able to see how we're doing there.
Excellent.
And then to Mr. Clanton's point about the educational planning, I like for us to really have that conversation. I know somewhere along the way, the comprehensive career and technical school just got lost somewhere. And part of the reason I was, I will continue to advocate, especially as we look at pandemic funds and other funds. You know, for the longest time, we were saying we didn't have the resources. And so I just like for us to be able, whether it's the academies or a career CT or whatever it is, have that as part of that discussion as well.
The support that has been given in prior years to the CTE high school, please understand the work did not go unrecognized. And what we're doing, if you look at the look ahead, it looks a little familiar to you. Part of the academies that would have been in the CTE high school, we are not waiting for a building or anything. We're making sure we're moving full steam ahead with the education of our children. So every academy is right there.
Right, I recognize
Your
that.
IB, your governor's health, the aviation is a new, it falls under STEM. And so we're making sure that everything we promised in that prescription or concept is up there. And we continue to build them out, and they're going to different schools, so students can benefit from that.
Ms. Basine?
Sorry, thank you so much for the presentation. So you just started to hit on my next question, which is if you could talk about, I guess that's something the board will talk about as we talk about the educational planning. I too agree, that's a conversation we need to have. But where, at least for some of these, especially those that are rolling out this next school year, where the anticipated, where these programs will be placed. You know, like the IB Career Program program, I'm assuming.
That's
will
Granby.
be at Granby.
And the reason being, not one school over the other. The reason being, we're working towards trying to align resources and align some of the CTE with the specialty programs. So some come with the prescription of exactly IB. You need to have the IB diploma program in order to have the IB career program. So that would go there.
And then like the aviation and aerospace program, for instance.
Aviation and aerospace, right now, Lake Taylor High School, as well as Booker T. Washington, others, they really started to work to train their teachers. We started last year in drones, aviation, and things of that nature. So we're looking at Lake Taylor High School starting, because their program has, their teachers are already certified, some of them, with Norfolk Technical Center being a hub. So for example, the students will be able to take the Drone Academy and Aviation at their home school, but the hub for aviation and aerospace would have to be the technical center, because we're working with different places to try to see if we can get a small aircraft brought in. And so therefore, we only can do it one time. I would love to do it, but one time. So Norfolk Technical Center will now become a hub for different places, and then some of the entry-level programs can be taken at the school. I know you're going to ask about health sciences, so I'm going to go ahead and jump right there. Health sciences working, EVMS is working with us with health sciences. As you know, Maury has EVMS, but it does not replace the Maury program. It supplements it. A lot of students not only wish to be doctors and nurses, but they want the affiliated medical fields, and so that's what that would do. So you have your home schools taking some classes, offering classes, and Norfolk Technical Center will serve as a hub. That's why we're pursuing like the National Accreditation for Pharmacy, working to be reaccredited with nursing. So Norfolk Technical Center, we can upgrade as a hub for the higher level programming, and then the entry levels can feed from the other schools. But if you notice, they're all being aligned with the specialty programs in support of and not replacement. And that helps us to really maximize resources. It's very hard to go to a business or an organization and ask for $200,000 and then ask for 3 other schools, but you can show them how you can create a pool of students talented and ready to go into the field by, funding one place. And so that's what we're working on. So aviation has a home right now. Health sciences, once we get it approved by the state, will have a home, IB, and then some of the other programs.
All right, thank you.
Oh, I was gonna say,
Okay.
my last question
Okay.
is gonna be, are we leveraging all that we can from our business and industry leaders to advance our CTE programs and student outcomes?
I think we need to grow in that area, only because things have changed so rapidly since we've returned from remote learning. There was a strong plan ready to move with businesses in 2019, and life just happened. And so not only are we trying to really reevaluate who we are, what we are, and restructure it, businesses are doing the same. So things that they had promised to us before, they can no longer do because maybe their workforce is now at home, or maybe their funding source has changed. So we're looking at everything from the perspective of students now, and also there's so many new and emerging fields. We thought we knew what we wanted to do March 2020. Now there's a whole cadre of businesses, organizations that we didn't even realize would be here. So we're reworking our relationship, evaluating, but I must say there is no business that has left the table from us. It's just the dynamics of the partnerships have now changed.
So if we need to look at our committee and try to bring them even in,
Absolutely.
like that's something you'll recommend to us
Yes.
to look at? Okay, all right, great.
Thank you for that question.
Yeah, thank you.
Anyone else?
I just, seems on that one, the dual enrollment, CTE dual enrollment.
Yes.
Can you expand upon that just quickly, a little bit on that one?
On April 21st, we will be meeting with Tidewater Community College. Currently, we offer dual enrollment at the high schools for computer information systems and some of the business courses. We also offer dual enrollment at Norfolk Technical Center for culinary, early childhood education. It is our goal for CTE to have all of the programs at NTC to be dual enrolled so that our students can either earn a certificate or, in alignment with growing dual enrollment for the division, we want concurrent earning of a high school diploma and an associate's degree, ensuring that the courses our students take are meaningful, that they can transfer over to a 2-year or 4-year university.
And that's what I wanted to make sure got highlighted, that students are not only getting their degrees, their certifications, but they have an opportunity for those high flyers who really want to go in that junior, senior year to be able to get their associate's degree.
That's right.
Great, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Goshen.
Thank you so much for your time.
All right, up next, we have our special education plan proposal for school year 2024 with Dr. Walter. Good evening.
Good evening. I'm just gonna raise this a little bit to make me feel as
Before
tall
you,
as I think
before
I
you
am
begin,
behind, and figure out who I have to ask to be ahead of my very capable colleague, Ms. Goshen, next year.
I was gonna say, before you
All right.
begin, I heard a compliment yesterday about your staff member who is liaisoning with SEAC.
Oh, okay.
And what a great job she's been doing.
Oh, with SEAC,
Who is it?
that's assigned to SEAC.
That's, yeah.
It's me. Yeah.
Oh.
Don't I go to SEAC every month?
Well, you're doing an amazing job, and they really appreciate you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I didn't know that you were
very
personally
much.
doing that, if it was someone in your office.
All right, well, good afternoon, Chairwoman Martin, Vice Chair Moore Buffalo, members of the board, and Dr. Birdsong. I am again pleased to be able to have the opportunity to present Norfolk Public Schools fiscal year 24 special education annual plan flow-through grant application. I am confident that the current application is again the result of a thoughtful and collaborative effort between the Department of Learning Support Special Ed Services and the Budget and Accounting Offices. In that respect, I would like to thank, Mr. Duran, the Director for Budgeting, and also Mr. Very, the Senior Director for Accounting. I am, of course, grateful to Dr. Birdsong and Dr. Pohl for their active and continuous support of the department and our efforts on behalf of students with disabilities in Norfolk. The overall result is, again, an application developed with intention to maximize opportunities for students in Norfolk, while also navigating the many challenges, as you're aware, currently impacting public education and localities' ability to do so, not just in Norfolk, but throughout Virginia and in the country. That said, on this slide, what you see here is some background information related to special education annual plan and its requirements for new members of the board and also for the public. The annual plan is an application to apply for federal grant funds to support students with disabilities under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act of 2004, often referred to as IDEA, and the regulations governing special education programs for children with disabilities in Virginia. The division's annual December 1 child count of students with disabilities is factored throughout the government's award calculation and impacts the division's award amounts. The application is developed with the assumption of level funding from the previous year per the Virginia Department of Education, or VDOE's, recommendations. However, VDOE may require adjustments to the division's proposed budget and use of funds based on final awards or changes in federal implementing requirements. Funding flows through the Commonwealth of Virginia via the VDOE to Norfolk Public Schools from the federal government, and plan implementation is reviewed, and a new application must be submitted annually to VDOE. Norfolk Public Schools fiscal year 24 annual plan was presented to and reviewed by the Norfolk Special Education Advisory Committee, or SEAC, on March 29th. As noted on this slide, Dr. Birdsong, as the superintendent of schools, annually certifies the completed annual plan and confirms the statement of assurances related to Norfolk's responsibilities in providing special education evaluations and services upon this board's approval of the proposed application and budget. Additional components of the application are included on this slide. These are confirmation of any applicable jail education programs within the city. Norfolk continues to maintain 2 full-time special education teachers that provide services at the Norfolk City Jail for incarcerated youth with disabilities who are eligible for services. It also includes a maintenance of effort budget projection, a description of the proportionate set-aside amounts required by IDEA to provide limited services for students with disabilities residing in the city but are homeschooled or parentally placed in private schools, and a description of the use of Title 6B and 6C grant funds, often referred to as Section 611 and 619, which can be used for personnel and other services related to educating preschool and school-age students with disabilities enrolled in Norfolk Public Schools. The Learning Support Special Education Services team and I remain persistent in our dedication and efforts to meet the unique needs of students with disabilities and provide them with the continuum of quality services and programs that they deserve. As of March 22nd, 2023, Norfolk Public Schools is responsible for providing services for 4,385 students with disabilities within our city. We continue to align our work to the division's strategic plan and drive for 5 focus areas, particularly in the areas of student excellence, workforce, and community. Thoughtful and responsible use of all funding and consideration of all resources is just one of the ways in which we work to do this. During the fiscal year 23 annual plan presentation, I noted that the Department of Learning Support Special Education Services had begun a variety of work in the initiatives noted on this slide to align with the division's overall Drive for 5 and now the strategic plan focus. As with the strategic plan, these are all multi-year initiatives, and therefore work in these areas are continuous and evolving. Some examples of our initiatives in action that support the area of student excellence are shared on the slide. As the Senior Director of Learning Support Special Ed Services, I'm particularly pleased to be able to share this work with you, but I certainly cannot take credit for it. Norfolk is fortunate to have exceptional senior coordinators, teacher specialists, and a variety of related service and other providers that lead this work. Even more, we have many hardworking school leaders and phenomenal special education and general education teachers working together on behalf of students with the support of many outstanding paraprofessionals. This year, we've initiated preschool facilitated playgroups led by learning support related services and itinerant early childhood special ed teachers that provide opportunity for some of our youngest learners and their families to learn through play while also making homeschool connections, which you see in the top left picture. We've instituted interdisciplinary therapy groups, also led by our learning support related services teams, which provide increased inclusion opportunities for some of our low-incidence students with disabilities, while collaborating with general education teachers, particularly in the related arts areas like music or art, and supporting those colleagues in meeting the needs of our children, which is pictured in the center. Our office supports and works with school staff and community stakeholders to provide students with in-school and community-based work opportunities, like the one you see in the bottom right corner with the student working on his food safety certification, We were able to get practical assessment exploration system, or PAIS labs, up and running in the high schools to provide school-based quality post-secondary transition instruction for students, like you see in the upper right corner. And we also worked with select schools and teachers alongside the William and Mary Training and Technical Assistance Center, or TTAC, on a year-long literacy writing professional development to support secondary writing for our students with disabilities, which is in the bottom left picture, and one of our wonderful high school secondary special education teachers there teaching one of those lessons. Likewise, on this slide, you see examples of just some of the initiatives supporting Norfolk Public Schools' strategic plan areas of workforce and community. We hosted multiple parent education opportunities in partnership with others, such as VDOE, or the State Parent Education Advocacy and Training Center, often referred to as PETC, such as the Critical Decision Points for Families of Children with Disabilities, or our upcoming ABCs of Behavior workshop, which will be held on April 20th, provided virtually. We led year-long professional development cohorts to support behavior and social-emotional learning for students with identified staff, such as paraprofessionals and teachers in our district-wide autism classrooms, who've worked with the BCBA on applied behavior analysis concepts and towards their registered behavior technician certifications, which is some of our staff you see pictured in the bottom center. And of course, there was our C's Equity and Excellence Conference, which has been rebranded this year as our Connecting for Students Summit, which you may have seen on social media, and is planned for August 3rd, and we hope to see all of you there. We're very excited about that and doing a lot of work around planning for that. So as you can see, our various funding sources go towards the hiring of excellent staff and implementation of supportive programs throughout the division. The fiscal year 23 annual plan application budgeted funds for the full-time positions under Section 611 and the coordinated comprehensive early intervening services set aside that you see referred to as CCEIS or Cs noted on this slide. Under the Section 611 portion of the grant for fiscal year 23, that included 39 special education teachers, 75 paraprofessionals, 2 teacher specialists, 4 administrative assistants, and 1 special ed administrator. Under the CCEIS or C's mandatory set-aside, that was 1 C specialist, 1 C social worker, and 12 C student intervention counselors. During the 21-22 school year, the C's implementation model was restructured to move from utilizing interventionists that had paraprofessional backgrounds to those with a school counselor background. This year, while the set-aside budgeted for those positions, we were able to staff just 6 of the student intervention counselors during 22-23, which has resulted in serving students in fewer of the secondary school sites than in 21-22, but close to the same number of students under C's, 107 during 22-23 this year, as opposed to 135 during 21-22. In that respect, an overview of the C's data points through March 8th of 2023 has been provided to the board as a supplement to tonight's annual plan presentation, so you should have received that information. There are proposed changes in the Section 611 and CCEIS portions of the division's annual plan application. As I move into presenting those changes, I would like to begin by again sharing the context under which Norfolk has participated in mandatory C set aside for now the 5th school year. Beginning in 2018-19 to the current 2022-23 school year, VDOE has had a mandated requirement that Norfolk set aside 15% of the Section 611 funds based on the division's disproportionality in the suspension and expulsion rates of students with disabilities, particularly African American students with disabilities. However, effective 2022-23, VDOE has removed those school divisions on mandated set-aside due to disproportionate disciplinary outcomes, and they've made that removal based on COVID-19 closure and virtual school year discipline data. School divisions with disproportionate special education eligibility and identification concerns will remain on mandated set-aside. So change in mandated set-aside status does not reflect significant improvement in local school divisions' use of alternatives to suspension, and VDOE did not provide us any formal notice to school divisions of the change in mandated set-aside status for fiscal or intervention planning purposes. I did end up reaching out to them, to confirm that change in status. Based on the change in the mandatory set-aside designation status for Norfolk, the division's application has been developed that is being proposed to you tonight to maintain a voluntary set-aside of funds to continue providing early intervention supports to identified at-promise students in Norfolk needing social, emotional, and behavioral supports. Aside from this being a best practice decision that aligns with the division's strategic plan efforts around safety and the climate, it is also a decision that reflects reasoned long-term planning and fiscal responsibility, given that the change in mandated set-aside status is not a result of significant improvement in local school division use of alternative suspensions. So the reality of it is with that not being based on a reduction in alternatives to suspension, there is a likelihood that we would be placed on mandated set-aside again in the future. That said, the fiscal year 24 application is budgeted to fund the following. Under Section 611 grant, that would be 38 special education teachers, 1 parent resource center educator, 75 special education paraprofessionals, 3 teacher specialists, and 4 administrative assistants. Under the CEIS set aside, because VDOE's distinction between voluntary and mandated is comprehensive early intervening services versus coordinated comprehensive, would be 1 C social worker and 12 C student interventionists. The Division C's implementation worksheet would be due to VDOE by June 30th, 2023, detailing how the division plans to implement those funds, all right, in terms of actual practice and services to students. This slide provides a screenshot of the budget worksheet for all portions of the 611 grant, including the required proportionate set-aside and the voluntary CEIS set-aside. The total budget amount is $7,708,177. The total for the 611 section of the grant, once both the proportionate set-aside for C's funds and the proportionate set-aside funds include $6,492,215.33. The majority of the grant is expended to support the positions as described on the previous slide, which, as you see, as Ms. Goshen said, in the personal services and employee benefits line in column C. The other services are indirect costs. These costs are charged to all federal grants to run grant programs and offset the division's operating budget. The monies go back to the district towards the operating budget and assist with the division's associated costs such as processing payroll, developing contracts, setting up requisitions and purchasing, and paying bills as a few examples. The state sets the indirect cost rate that the divisions are allowed to charge to the grants each year in July. The $261,740.31 you see here and in all sections of the grant reflects the state's current 4.2% indirect cost rate. The remaining 611 grant funds available after personnel, benefits, and indirect costs are $109,598.95. Those funds have been budgeted to the materials and supplies lines to support instructional and general supplies needed to assist with professional development and implementation of instructional efforts as described in the department alignment with division strategic plan and focused initiatives. The cost to continue voluntarily setting aside C's funds are listed in column D. The total is $1,113,791.43, with again the majority of the cost budgeted for personnel and benefits. The $14,394.05 in purchase services will support professional development for C staff and contract services to support interventions for students receiving C services in a variety of topics and practices addressing positive behavioral interventions and improved disciplinary or academic outcomes. The $9,241.63 is budgeted to support materials and supplies around those areas of professional development and implementation of interventions to students. The proportionate set-aside amounts listed in column E support parentally placed private school or homeschool students with disabilities in Norfolk. MPS uses these funds to provide speech and language services, including consultation or according to students' individualized service plans. The $100,146.05 funds the cost of contracting a speech-language pathologist, and the $2,024.19 to support instructional material or supply needs in delivery of those services. The final budget portion of the application includes Section 619 for preschool special education services. During fiscal year '23, these grant funds provided for two full-time early childhood special education teachers at Easton Preschool and one early childhood special education paraprofessional. The fiscal year '24 application maintains these positions. These positions are part of our early childhood special education or preschool special education programs. Not all ECSE staff are funded through 619, the same as all school-age special education programs and services are not funded through Section 611. This slide provides a screenshot of the budget worksheet for 619. The total budget is $268,906. This includes $154,389.88 for personnel, $62,189.24 for employee benefits, and $5,730 for purchased services, which includes technology software and subscriptions for early childhood special ed programs and classes. There's also $35,886, and 55 cents for materials and supplies, and the indirect cost amount for this portion of the grant is $10,710.33. That said, this concludes a summary of the required components of the fiscal year '24 Special Education Annual Plan application. The annual plan is required for submission to VDOE with board approval and the superintendent's certification no later than May 12, 2023. We will be recommending that the school board vote to approve the Norfolk Public Schools fiscal year '24 annual special education application for federal flow-through funds at the April 19, 2023 business meeting following your review. And at this time, I am prepared to take any questions that you have. Following this questions and discussion slide, however, there is a short slide with some special education or education abbreviations and terms used throughout the presentation that have been included, and that was upon recommendation of our Norfolk SEAC after my presentation to them on the 29th. They asked that I include a slide with the terms, so I did do that. And I do thank them for that recommendation as well as their questions, feedback, and also their support throughout the year. So again, at this time, I'm prepared to take any questions or comments to assist you all in your review and approval of the division's fiscal year '24 application.
Thank you very much, Dr. Walter.
Thank you.
Ms. Campson, go ahead, and then Ms. Basine.
All right, I'm not real clear about the set-asides.
Sure.
So the state, all right, the state have mandatory requirements that we set aside 15%.
Yes, ma'am.
And that money is used to staff the, is it used to, all right, see, you can tell, I don't know. I'm not clear on exactly how that money's going.
Where it was going under the previous application or where it's being proposed?
All right, well, all right, oh, okay, see, that's part of it there. So the proposal is Title 6B?
On the slide here is where it's being proposed. So 1C social worker and 12C student interventionist is where it's being proposed for fiscal year '24.
All right, and from that,
And that is column D, the
Oh.
$1 million.
all right,
$13,791.43.
so the set-aside comes out of this.
It comes out of the overall grant, it technically comes out of, yes, section 611.
Right, so if we have, all right, so we've got that, and then they pull out 15%.
Well, when it's a mandatory, when VDOE says
Like it
that
says
you-
on the next one, mandatory,
Yes.
set aside 15%.
Yes, so if VDOE mandates that we set aside, then we must set aside exactly 15%. If the division chooses to voluntarily set aside, then the requirement is that you can set aside up to 15%. So because VDOE has said now, based on data that does not reflect an actual reduction in expulsion and suspension per se, or improvements in alternatives to suspension, what this application proposes is that we move towards a voluntary set-aside, just to continue providing services and supports to students that may need them, and two, to reduce the likelihood that we would have to come back to a mandated set-aside, repurpose funds, repurpose positions, as the division ended up having to do at the beginning of the 2018-19 school year when we were first notified of it. Under voluntary set aside, we do not have to set aside exactly 15%.
Well, what are you doing with the set-aside money?
We are still going to utilize a C social worker and the 12C student interventionist.
So-
The change that is being made is that there's not going to be a C's specialist. And so under voluntary with this budget, it's not quite a 15% set aside. After moving those position funds back under 611, it came out to about 14.2%. And so when you look at the fiscal year 24 application budget, you see that now it says that there are 3 teacher specialists instead of the 2. And so that position, or funds for that position that was previously a C specialist, is going to go under 611 to serve as a general learning support teacher specialist.
And
The
so,
rationale, did you want me to?
so what that says is that the state decides what staff person you put in place, rather than you making the decision?
No. The state doesn't tell us what to do with the set-aside.
Oh, okay.
And quite frankly, we're not under mandated set-aside. We don't have to set aside anything.
But if you were,
Sure.
if it was to happen again as it happened last time, no.
They don't tell us what to do with the set-aside.
They just tell you,
simply-
you need to set aside this for our priority students who have behavior problems?
They tell you have to set it aside, and you have to identify how you're going to use it to provide intervening services to address the disproportionate issue.
Okay, thank you.
Does that answer your question? It's
Kind of.
confusing. It's a
Kind
lot
of, I
work.
just wanted to make sure that they weren't grabbing money back,
Oh,
pulling
no,
back
no, no.
money
I
back
mean, we
that
will
wasn't
still-
used.
No, ma'am. We will,
I was ready to fight for it.
no, I appreciate that. Thank you in advance, but no, ma'am.
And that you get the choice of what kind of staff person you put in place to work with this group of children.
And it may be helpful, Dr. Walter, to explain why the transition from back to a general specialist than the C specialist.
So overall, whether it's mandated or voluntary, I mean, C's is not a very large program. And as you see on the slide, the Learning Support has other teacher specialists, not just the ones funded under flow-through. I have other ones that are funded through operating. As a general rule, the senior coordinators and the teacher specialists in our department, they provide a number of supports to many schools and many programs, and those include, of course, when you're dealing with special education, you're always supporting compliance, but they provide a number of coaching and instructional supports out in schools. So a lot of those things that you heard me share about on the slides about our initiatives, my team members are out there, the ones starting those initiatives and running and leading those initiatives. They're the ones out there leading facilitated play groups, setting up PAYS labs, going into classrooms, coaching teachers, out there leading professional development, working alongside TTAC to go into classrooms and learn how to implement some of these specially designed instruction practices or evidence-based practices, and providing regular coaching and support and sort of that internal division capacity to provide that hands-on shoulder-to-shoulder support to schools and teachers. As I said, C's is a very, very small program. It really does not require a dedicated specialist. I still have it assigned, even with a specialist, under the supervision of a senior coordinator as well. And so because voluntary set-aside does not require an exact 15% set-aside, the funds for that position have been moved back under 611 so that then a teacher specialist position could be used to support broader students with disabilities and other programs. Namely, the senior coordinator that does currently support C's also supports, for example, our K-8, 3-8 schools is one of the other areas that she supports. And so she's also one of the only coordinators that has just one teacher specialist supporting her schools. So between the two of them, they support Southside STEM, ADL, some of the other schools that they have. The other thing that we have, of course, with Ruffner moving towards a 3-8 school, that school would be moving, under her support as well. So adding that position under 611 so that it could support more than just Cs was the rationale for that, because the voluntary set-aside does not require an exact 15%. So that was the rationale for that. Okay.
It's very helpful. Thank you very much.
Any other questions?
Go ahead, Ms.
Don't
Basine.
understand.
I commend your foresight and your proactive stance in in making sure we have that voluntary set aside, especially if we're using the data to determine whether to enforce the mandate or not, and especially in light of OSEP, the whole thing about the additional monitoring activities on VDOE, and the areas of concern that they want VDOE to address, new and longstanding areas that they want them to address related to special education. So
And VDOE is going down the list to
Okay.
monitor school divisions. They have not gotten to Norfolk yet, but.
okay, well,
they'll
that was
through.
going to be my question. Is that is there are there other areas that you feel, because I'm confident you're hitting all the things, being proactive in making sure that all of what needs to be covered is covered, and whatever we can do to support you in this plan is here. So but what I guess one of the questions, so the BCBAs, last year you had a cohort? So
So
is
last
that-
year, what we ended up doing, we had an opportunity, actually not with the, so what I shared with you is, again, as I said, we utilize all the funding that we have available to us, operating, flow-through, of course, with ESSER funding. Also with flow-through, there were additional American Rescue Plan funds under last year's grant cycle that won't be available under this year's grant cycle. So we take a look at all of those in terms of when we, have initiatives. But yes, we did last year end up using funds under ESSER that we were able to do a cohort, both not just for some of our paraprofessionals in the elementary autism district-wide classrooms. There were some paraprofessionals and a teacher or so that worked with those paras, as well as our C's staff. And we have done a year-long PLC with them where they have learned about ABA concepts and/or SEL concepts. The staff that are in the district-wide AUT classrooms have done a track that's been focused primarily on the ABA concepts and working towards modules to prepare for the registered behavior technician certification. So they've actually just completed all of their modules and are getting ready to take their certification exams.
Okay.
So very excited about that. And so
about-
that was the bottom center picture on
Oh.
that group right there in the bottom center
yeah.
there.
Oh,
So
okay.
very
I
excited,
didn't see
and you
that.
see they're still smiling because they just took that picture the other week.
Is
So
that
they're-
how many are in there?
Yes,
Is
that was
that's number
so
of-
that group there, two of those folks are teachers, and the other are paraprofessionals in our
Okay.
elementary.
And they're all in the cohort?
Yes.
Okay.
And that's just one of the cohorts. We ran two.
The
you know.
two, okay.
And the other one was our C's, student intervention counselors and the social worker.
Okay.
They were a separate cohort. They're not doing the registered behavior technician because they don't only work with students that are in, say, an district-wide program. They work with students that are a variety of students with disabilities. But they did a cohort that was focused on both a combination of learning about some ABA concepts, because they do encounter students identified with a primary disability category of autism, but they also support other students with disabilities. And their cohort model also focused on overall social emotional learning instruction and social skills instruction. But both cohorts were facilitated both by one of my teacher specialists on the team and by a, board certified behavior analysis throughout the year. And each group met, don't quote me, bi-weekly, once for like an in-person professional development, and then once for individual coaching sessions, and then in between the bi-weeks, they worked on modules, you know what I mean, and then they came together to do work, so.
And they're all staying in the district, right?
All staying.
The important question.
Not heard that anyone is leaving, so very exciting, and they had a good time. And like I said, you see they're all still there, they're all still there.
And they're smiling.
Yes.
All right,
Good.
Mr. Jordan?
Thank you. Great seeing you at Little Feet yesterday.
Yes. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, always a great place to go smile. To what do you attest the 28 fewer students than the previous year? Is that a good thing?
So, you mean in terms of the C students?
I'm sorry,
served?
I was looking at your data profile. That
Sure.
you provided. Yeah, on the C students.
Sure. So, as I said, well, honestly, the biggest challenge was, I think you heard me mention that while the budget, let me go to that slide here, the fiscal year 23 application, we budgeted funds for this number of positions under the mandated C set aside. But if you look at those 12 C student intervention counselors, we were only able to staff 6 of those this year. And when we designed this particular intervention plan, we were very specific that because this is supposed to be targeted interventions for students that need that behavior support, we wrote those positions that although they're school counselor background, they are not functioning like regular school counselors. The majority of their day is spent providing direct supports to students. We maxed out their caseloads to a certain number, and we have them housed 1 per school. Because we were not able to staff them the way that we wanted to, we just were not able to serve as many students and keep them within that caseload amounts and have them be true to what we originally implemented. So this year, we tried to still serve close to as many students as we could, but it ended up being in fewer of the C school sites.
Okay, I appreciate that. So it's caseload driven.
Yes, it's
And-
caseload.
and
We
then-
wanted to not overload caseloads and still give kids the supports that we said we would.
And then on the data chart itself, I interpret the things that are in green are considered better things.
Yes, I was happy about those numbers, Mr. Jordan.
Yeah, no, I just want to make sure
Okay.
I follow it. And so the
I mean, they could always be better, but I was happy about
oh
them.
no, I just want to make sure I'm reading it correctly. I'm glad it's better. I was just going to ask, what are your thoughts on, I don't know if you follow students from grade to grade, but is there anything you can share about the success that you had with, in one sense, the fewer students that are 11 plus days? Are those students then find themselves in the 0 category? Or are they in the 1 to 5? Is any?
Well, I mean, keep in mind, I'm only able to provide you this comparison this year because we just revised this implementation plan last year. You know what I mean? So last year was sort of the baseline from moving towards the model under mandated Cs, where we had for a few years been using paraprofessionals as the interventionists, if you recall. So last year was the first year we had moved towards using the school counselor background staff for the interventionists, and then this year now being the second year. While I'm providing you a year-over-year comparison, and there are some overlaps in the students that received C services last year to this year, there's also transition. So it's still not ever going to be an exact apples-to-apples comparison where I can say, from 6th grade to 7th grade to 8th grade, so on and so forth, that it's an exact number.
Right, but internally, you all know.
Yes. And I will say too
Rodney
that.
was 11-plus days last year, and Rodney's
Yes.
at 1 day or 0 days this year.
Yes, and overall, I mean, which would make sense when you look at the data that I did provide for you, because what you saw is some of the data points that I did highlight to point out, for those listening to the discussion, is that the number of students that were receiving C's services overall, out of that group, there was a lower percentage of those students that had received out-of-school suspensions up to the same point in the school year, which I gave you a March-to-March comparison based on the school board presentation. It was about a 10% reduction of out-of-school suspensions for the group this year as compared to the group last year. There was, 21% of the group has had 0 days of suspensions this school year, compared to only 11% of the group receiving services last school year. And so again, comparatively, only 14% of the group this year receiving services having received 11-plus days of suspension, which is still, we would like to see that even more, but comparatively, it was 43% of the students receiving C services had received 11-plus days of suspension by March of last year. So there were some improvements. So when you look at those numbers, even though it's not an apples to apples, it's all of the same students. When I look at the student data for the group this year, overall, the number of referrals for that group is, yes, much lower than the number of referrals for last year's group, which would make sense. Obviously, if they're getting sent to the office less, that's going to reduce the likelihood that they are at risk for out-of-school suspension as well, so.
I think it looked like a good thing. I just wanted to make
Yes.
sure you to confirm
You were
that it's a good
correct
thing.
that my
Okay.
green numbers were,
Okay.
I like these numbers, Mr. Jordan.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Walter.
Welcome. All righty, I'm going to make a run for it and just again make a note of who I have to ask to go before Miss Goshen next year. All right? You all have a lovely evening.
Okay, and then on deck we have Mr. Mike Ross. He's talking about our Booker T. Washington High School feasibility study update. Yeah, he's like one of our contractors.
I feel compelled to introduce him. He's the
Oh, did you want to
principal
introduce him?
architect for
Sorry.
HBA.
Sorry, Mr.
And
Fraley.
he's a lead educational resource. He works with many school divisions in the state of Virginia, and we were fortunate enough to secure them for this feasibility study. Mr. Ross, if you would come to the podium.
Thank you. So he's listed right here, so I'm gonna start. You can begin whenever you're ready, but how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing great.
Good, thanks for being here.
Enjoyed listening to all the presentations tonight.
Great.
I don't talk as fast as your excellent staff. They're wonderful. So my pleasure to be here this evening. Let's see. Give you an update on the Booker T. Washington High School Phase 1 feasibility study. So good evening, Chairwoman
I'm
Dr.
sorry?
Martin
Yes.
and Vice Chair Buffalo and school board members and Dr. Birdsong. My pleasure to be here. So I want to start turning remote on. Start with the reflecting on the purpose of the study, and this is what I'm sharing with you is some of the critical language from the 2019 school board resolution that authorized this study. Whereas it is critically important to ensure that all 5 of Norfolk high schools have an active and academically challenging academy program. Whereas it is the desire of the school and surrounding community to ensure that Booker T. Washington High School has a vibrant and competitive academy that will retain and attract a diverse group of students from across the city. And whereas it is essential to bring stakeholders together to provide input into what the future academic program has in store for Booker T. Washington High School. So I also want to touch on the ongoing tremendous financial commitment that Norfolk Public Schools has been making towards the Booker T. Washington building, the structure and the infrastructure. There are projects underway to replace the roofing systems, replace the HVAC systems, and also future projects to replace windows and electrical systems. The roof replacement project is actually under contract, and the HVAC systems replacement project, I expect to go out to bid within the next 30, 45 days. So those are all projects that are going towards really replenishing what we call the bones of the building, making sure that your students are warm, safe, cool, and dry, and are in a place that is conducive to learning. The other thing we'll be focusing on with this study is really aligning with your strategic plan, in particular the goal of student excellence and providing specialty programs and opportunities for student choice. So this feasibility study is different from investing in the bones of the building. This is all about looking at the desired educational programs, both as a comprehensive high school and also as an academy for visual and performing arts, and defining what future space should look like, what types of equipment, furnishings, and technology that should be provided to make this a vibrant academy. And that's what we'll be focusing on. So this slide shares a very high-level overview of the planning process. It starts with data gathering, and the things that we've been doing over the course since we started this study. We did what we call an existing space utilization analysis, which looks at how each and every space is used for every period of the day, and also outside of normal school hours. Some of my young architects got to pretend they were a Booker T. Washington High School student and got to experience the culture of the school, so that was very cool. We also have developed a very extensive virtual tour of exemplar school facilities throughout the country that we've shared with our stakeholders to give them examples of what's happening in terms of best practices for both comprehensive high schools and also academies for visual and performing arts. We conducted a few really good student visioning workshops, and we've also had intensive interviews with all of the school staff. So, and then the text on these slides that is in black are the things that we've completed, and the things that are in white are things that are coming in the future. So the next kind of overlapping phase of that was community engagement, and we worked with Michelle Washington and her department to develop a community engagement web portal. We have conducted several community engagement meetings. We have met with a number of special interest groups and focus groups. We are still in the process of interviewing community partners, in particular arts partners. And we are just beginning what we call the planning process with our educational specifications stakeholder steering committee. We completed one of those labs back in early February, and we've got at least 2, maybe 3 more of those to go. Once we work our way through the planning labs and have defined what it is, what the goals are, and what types of spaces we need to provide, we'll be doing some conceptual design test fit overlays on the existing footprint to see how we can best accommodate the future programs with the appropriate types of spaces, and then we'll be developing some preliminary CIP budget estimates to give you some idea of what it might look like to implement those programs. And then finally, we will develop a draft report and recommendations, present that report to you, get your feedback, take that back out to our stakeholders, take that back out to the community, get their feedback, and then hopefully bring that back to you as a final presentation and recommendation. So I mentioned we've already started the community engagement process. We conducted a couple of student workshops back in May of '22. We had 2 open community meetings, one in September at Booker T. Washington High School cafeteria, and one in October at the Ruffner Middle School cafeteria. We met with the Gethsemane religious leaders in October. Michelle Washington's department reached out to all the civic leagues that are in the attendance zone, and 3 of them invited us to their civic league meetings, so we met with them and got got some of their input on what they were hoping to see as part of this feasibility study. And then I mentioned that we're in the midst of and have just started the planning labs. So the educational specifications planning lab process really is focused on a process that starts with the why. And the why is what you clearly articulated already in your resolution. The next step of that is identifying who is going to be impacted by these programs. And we've already started identifying and engaging with the students, the teachers and staff, the leaders and administrators, school district agencies, parents and siblings, business partners, funding sources, community members, and I mentioned arts partnerships. And the next step of the process, which we'll be starting about midway through the second planning lab, is really taking a deep dive into the desired educational program, what the curriculum will look like as this program gets built out. And then finally, we'll be looking at what types of spaces that we need to provide to maximize the opportunities for student learning in the context of this comprehensive high school and visual and performing arts academy. And that leads to the design process, which is the next step. I've mentioned the stakeholder steering committee several times. So that's a group of invited participants that are working with us through this planning lab process. Our firm and Delsina's Miles firm worked with Michelle Washington's department again to identify who these folks would be: local business leaders, faith leaders, community leaders, arts partners, parents, other community leaders, students, school staff, senior central administrators. And this process is a process that starts with what we call a discovery phase, where we really look at defining what our goals, what are our givens, what are we starting to work with, evaluating our capacities, capabilities, and really just starting to think about where are the opportunities to improve. And that moves into what we call visioning, imagining what is possible, continuing to listen to the community and defining what's important for both the community and also the learners, and then synthesizing all this information that we gathered through our data gathering process and all through these planning labs into a vision of actionable strategies. And that forms our design guidelines for developing this pre-design phase of conceptualizing what this might look like in the building and developing those strategies as design parameters with what the budget implications from implementation might be. So I took the liberty of sharing with you what our proposed next steps and timeline might look like if we are authorized to continue with this program. We could have another planning lab with our stakeholders as early as May. We'll continue with our community partners interviews also in May, and then hope to have another educational specifications planning lab in early June. Start those conceptual design test fit overlays in June and July, and then work through the summer developing those, developing budget estimates, develop our draft report and recommendations in August, and come back to you in either August, September of 2023. And then, as I mentioned, get your feedback, take the draft report with your feedback back out to the community, back out to the stakeholder committee, get their follow-up guidance on where we should be heading with this, and then come back to you in October timeframe to make a final presentation.
Any questions? Dr. Gabriel and Mr. Clanton.
Thank you, Dr. Martin. I am very excited about this opportunity for Booker T. Washington, and while I've been following along with the different community meetings and, of course, from the facility side, all of the incredible investments that have been placed, HVAC, the windows, the roofing, electrical, all of that. What's wonderful, as you very nicely laid out in the presentation, is how much you have gone out to receive the community input, and not just community, but also from students and from staff. And so I appreciate the data point timeline that you have here with what you propose are actionable items than when you'll be presenting back to the board. And again, all of this will tie into our goal for incredible high expectations for a terrific program with good student outcomes that we're hopeful for. So I support it. I say we continue to move ahead. I know that there's a lot of work that goes into this, and I appreciate it. I especially the effort into reaching out to the civic leagues. I think we learned a lot of lessons from some of our previous educational planning items, and I see this as all steps in the right direction, especially for our students.
Thank you, Dr. Gabriel. Mr. Clanton?
All right. Yep, I ditto the same sentiment. I appreciate the information back. I did my question, and this might be you, Dr. Martin, because I heard you say if we approve the continuation. And that's where my question is, because my understanding is that on December 18th, 2019, this board voted on a resolution, which we were presented, and subsequently we approved funding to move this work forward. I appreciate the update. Are we supposed to be taking another action, or?
Not today.
Oh.
Nothing.
Or at all.
Or at all?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Same
Yeah.
question.
Right.
And I think that this really dovetails in, and I appreciate in the timeline, but then also going back in, and that goes back to what Ms. Goshen was presenting, and going back to some of the things that I was saying, is that we have academies, we have specialty programs, but as you look through, CTE is everywhere and it's ever present throughout our division. And I think that what we were getting to in some of the community meetings that I was sitting in and hearing was literally hearing from individuals that there are multiple different things. We already have identified career pathways from the Virginia Department of Education. Entrepreneurship could be taught at what Booker T. Washington has. We have STEM that could be taught. Well, I think I was hearing something about drones and so forth. But there's music production that's already taking place, and we put the resources in Booker T already. I'm glad to see what's happening with the roofs. So if I haven't driven by, anybody's watching, drive by, you will see it in the old parking lot down where they used to do driver's ed. But we're moving on the things that we said that we would do at Booker T. Washington High School. And I think that it's great that we're having members of the community to come in and to figure out how do we expand the academy that's already there. And really what I see is if we have arts is what the academy is there right now, that there's nothing to say that they couldn't really have what we consider a STEAM component, where you have science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics. Being a musician myself, I was in the Technology Student Association. Matter of fact, y'all have heard me say it before, I was state president of Virginia TSA, but I was also at the governor's school. Those things balance out and support. And I believe that having that experience is what helped me to be focused and helped me as a student. So I appreciate that. I hope that we get back to having the community voice back in a room so that we can continue and make sure that the sooner we can move on this, the sooner we can, as we're moving through ed planning, the better we can do by students. I know that we had a conversation earlier as a governance team, but what are we doing for students? And I believe that if we delay or there are any additional delays, it only hurts our students. And so we need to move forward to ensure that that voice is there. And I think that the resolution was pretty clear as to what it's doing, and I appreciate the work that your team, because I've been there to watch it. And that's not to, not to be on the steering committee, but to support the efforts of the division and the administration. So I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Fraley, and all that are there. But we need to get moving.
Thank you, Mr. Clinton. I'm going to go with Mr. Jordan and then Ms. Basine.
Yeah, I appreciate the update. My view is a little different in that I agree with what Mr. Clanton was saying about the opportunity to grow and define STEAM as an example. I acknowledge that I was confused because I remember when the resolution came up that what I was thinking was in the resolution that there was going to be something that would come back to the board that would recommend what the academy would be, whether it was the continuation with Academy for the Arts, whether it was STEAM, whether it was something else. And So I was trying to get a deeper understanding of that process of where the academy determination was made. I still like to get a better understanding of that if anyone's willing to share that. Beyond that, the other piece of it, as we talk about trying to attract across the city, I did have concerns and do have some concerns because what you mentioned earlier was that you were doing community engagement to the Booker T. Washington attendance zone. So for me, when I hear that, that is not citywide. That's defined or confined to the existing attendance zone. And what I would like to encourage for the administration, the team to consider moving forward down whatever path is that that we fish in a water fishbowl. So there could be families or children in any parts of the city that may find this work exciting and may have some thoughts about what they'd like to see, so that indeed we can achieve the goal of attracting the diverse group that we've identified. And right now, the current Booker T. Washington footprint doesn't reflect the diversity of the city as a whole. And so I think that if we're going to sell excellence at Booker T in whatever fashion, then we need to hear from stakeholders across the city so that their voices are included as well. But my understanding is there was work done around the recommendation for continuing the Academy for the Arts there, and I just like to have the benefit of that thought process and research that went into it. I'm not asking for it now. I just think it would be helpful because that was what I thought the process was going to be. We would do the outreach, there would be some conversations, there would be a recommendation, the board would say, yes, that's the direction we want to go, and then all this great work that you're doing would align with that.
Go ahead, Dr. Burton.
So from my perspective as the superintendent in December of 2019, the administration was asked to go to the community about the existing academy at Booker T. Washington High School, and to bring in a consultant who could evaluate and assess and give us some information and data back about what we needed to do as a school division to make sure that this academy was a world-class academy. And that's exactly what this administration has done. And so Mr. Jordan brought to my attention that he believed that we were going in another direction, and he and I disagreed about that. So I shared with the chair and the vice chair that I would cease all work around this because it was certainly causing confusion amongst community members, and we would hear some of that confusion within some of the meetings about why are we talking about the existing academy. And so I just want to be very clear in that I was very clear in the direction that was provided to me. I certainly wouldn't have wasted human resources, financial resources in moving this initiative forward if that's not what the administration was told to do. We were asked to do that, and that's what we have done. And if the board is ready to make another decision around Booker T. Washington and programming at that school, we are happy to acquiesce and do whatever we need to do to follow the board's direction, but I firmly believe that we have been. And if the board, again, wants to go in another direction, we're happy to do that, but we've done what was asked of us.
And I don't want, if I may,
No, go ahead.
I'm not, my intention is not to get in that debate. I'm just saying that from my role, I also represent the vision and values of the community. And so the comments were brought to me. I wasn't bringing it to the community. The questions were coming. And so I had inquired over time, just trying to get an understanding of, where we were. So I don't want to belabor it at this point. I just want to be clear that if there has been work and some recommendations that resulted in this, I'd just like to have an opportunity to be privy to it. I did not read the resolution in the same way. I remember when we had the discussion about it that I was specifically asking, would it come back to the board? And that's why I was trying to get clarity on that. So,
And if I may, because I don't want to belabor it either, the resolution is very open.
yes.
And it was open for a reason, in the respect that out of this process, the community may come back and say they want something totally different,
Right, right.
which means that the report that we would receive is the feasibility study. That's the report that would come back to this board before they made any decision, because you got to put the academic program in before you're doing any changes to the building. And so this was taking it back to the community for them to look at what was existing there. Right now is the Academy of Arts. That's what's been there. And as long as I've known Norfolk Public Schools, when it used to be over at Lake Taylor High School, we've always had a repertory program. We've always had some type of arts program. But we can't be so, and I've heard the same thing from the same constituents that we represent. For some who don't understand, just like the same thing, we don't use the term vocational arts. Now we're using career and technical education and some of those other things. So the fine and performing arts is not a thing that's in a silo. That's why I mentioned the whole aspect of STEAM, in the respect that you have all those things and they all interconnect. But what I will say that I agree with you, Mr. Jordan, in the respect is I do believe that if there's something that comes out of this board here is we could potentially, as a board without, no objection, to open it up for other individuals to serve on the steering committee, because I think y'all have made it pretty open that anybody can serve. Mm-hmm. So if there are individuals across the city, I think that maybe put it back out there and say, we welcome you to be at the table. This is a new program that we're looking, because you know how I feel. I would like to get rid of attendance boundaries anyway. So,
Say the last part again.
I said I would love to get rid of attendance boundaries. That's
right.
At the high school level. Mm-hmm. But my thing is that I think that maybe we could have some agreement in respect of sending clear direction to the administration, open it up. And then when I say open it up, that we want all members of the community who want to participate to have a voice, that they can sign up and become a member of the steering committee and participate in this process. But ultimately, me personally, I just want to see the process happen. And it's for our students, so that we get back here, we can have a clear idea, the administration's moving, and as we start looking at these dollars that are coming through, and as we begin to plan, we can plan something that'll be in time that our students will benefit.
Okay. Ms. Vacine, thank you for your patience.
Of course. Well, I'm glad we're having this dialogue, because I too have, I attended several of the community meetings and some of the Civic League meetings as well, and heard some of the feedback from community members about, who decided that this was, a performing arts academy, and just was hearing some other ideas, about what it could be, which is great. That's what we want. It's like, and those were some of the questions that were asked, what does a Booker mean to you? And what is, and so it was a very, there were a lot of inspiring discussions that came out of those meetings. And I think we should, as part of that, I like, we've talked about Booker T being a STEAM academy. I think all of the hard work that has gone into the Performing Arts Academy can be maintained and continue and thrive. But we can also consider other options and programs. But I do think that needs to obviously take place before, the building and other aspects are considered. And along that, staying on that path, one of the other pieces of feedback that I heard is, how do we know, how is the Academy of Performing Arts doing? So it's, how many people are, participating in that program? There was I think there was some interest in knowing how it's thriving, and just where are we now with that program? And that's what I heard from some of the citizens that were at the meeting. So that might be something to consider as you continue these community dialogue meetings. And that I think would be good for the board to also know, because we get asked that question as well. And I don't know if Dr. Birdsong, I saw your hand go up. I don't know.
Yes, I just
Yeah.
want to have a final point when you're done.
Oh, okay. The other thought, just, and this is just an idea that I wanted to share with the board as well, as we're talking about other programmatic ideas that could be considered. There's also the idea of, I'm thinking about the data, thinking about, what we've talked about in terms of making high school more relevant, enticing, for our high schoolers, and having like an early college program that could still be part of, STEAM, performing arts, but having that, how do we make how do we attract a citywide pool of students? And that's something that, the board could also consider, but, I know we're not here to hash out the program, but just wanted to put that out there as a thought that, and summarize, I think we're on the right, I think we need to continue discussion. I think this is good. I've heard a lot of good discussion at the meetings, but I think we should keep this open for greater dialogue. So keep it there.
Great, thank you. Dr. Birdsong, do you want to say
As a
something?
final comment from me, and this is why I asked this to be placed on the agenda, because again, the administration was giving a direction. Based upon that direction, we developed an RFP, and we were specific about and what we were looking for. So I don't know, with this discussion happening now, if we have to put out another RFP to do this work, because specifically, well, that's why I'm putting this out there, because we were charged with moving forward with the existing program and looking at that. Now I'm hearing that we need to consider other programs. Certainly, we knew that going out in the community, there would be feedback about, what does a booker look like, future booker, what have you. In those discussions, all of that would have come out, but that's not what the board asked me to do. The board asked me to focus on the existing program, and that's what we have done, which is why I'm asking the question and for the board to take a vote. So you can either affirm this is the direction that we want you to continue to go in as directed in 2019. We developed an RFP around that. We've had a consultant who is doing work around that. If that needs to change, then there are a lot of other things that we need to change. And again, we're happy to do that. We have followed.
I'm sorry, Dr. Birdsong.
Sure.
So who brought this here today to talk about a vote? Because I'm confused now.
I brought it because, again, I've been getting, Mr. Jordan and I were corresponding back and forth. We took that conversation I did to the board chair and vice chair during agenda planning, because, again, there was this whole thing about who said that you needed to focus on the Academy of Performing Arts and Visual Arts at Booker T High School. The board did, not Sharon Birdsong, not the administration. We were doing what the board asked us to do. And again, I don't want to speak for Mr. Jordan. I think he even said, he was confused about what we were doing or what have you. We were doing what the board asked us to do. And so that's the work we've been doing. That's the work that I stopped doing to make sure that there was another direction that you wanted me to go in. We're happy to do that, but based on what the direction was given to me in December, that's the work that we've been focused on. And again, if the board changes, we're flexible.
Well,
Obviously, we're flexible.
As
And
I
so we'll
said,
do what the board
directs us to do.
There's a resolution already done. We've already committed funds for that. And in that resolution, it says a vibrant and competitive academy. That's open enough for me to say that whatever comes out of the community, to say in there, if we want to keep the Academy of the Arts and you want to add STEAM and some of these other things around it to support that, go forward. Or if the community comes back and says that we think that such and such could be more competitive, that's what we're going to get out of the feasibility study. I don't see anything changing, me personally, see anything changing out of that. And I think that what we've heard, and I go back to, Ms. Goshen, about the other opportunities, there are so many other opportunities to add other things to enhance what's happening there. And I think that needs to, we need to allow that to be able to happen, and allow that to come back in a report. So I don't see you changing anything, and that's my personal opinion, that you need to change anything what's happening with the RFP.
If I could speak for a moment, Dr. Birdsong, that would take us back 2 or 3 steps. We are fully committed to where we are. If I could just interject a couple of thoughts. So, as you all know, I came on board in August of 20. We were still on stay-at-home instruction. We finally returned back to in-person instruction, and I engaged the administration at Booker T. Washington High School to make sure they're aware of the investment and the focus. They were. They said they were working with their internal group and an external group of folks, previous alumni, previous department chairs, staff members from Old Dominion. There was a very deep group that they were working with externally and internally, and the entire focus was on the Academy for the Arts. So we worked for about a year, and then in March of 2022, after going back and forth and listening to a whole lot of conversation, we sat down and developed a statement of work, which was what the document we used to put out our RFP. And then we were fortunate enough to secure HBA in April of 22, not long after completing that. And then we started to engage, and Mike, would you go back to the other schedule? So after we got that RFP out, you'll see we started to engage in May, and we did that really engaging workshop, and then what happened was SOL testing hit, and then we needed to deal with the fact that we were surprised that Dr. Hayes decided to retire, and then we had to take a break because we had to give the new administration an opportunity to come in and acclimate. Then we re-engaged in September, as you can see, and then the new principal was, I sat down with him, and he was 100% gung-ho on keeping it the Academy for the Arts. And so that's why we're here. That's why we're presenting our progress so far. But to go back to the community to say, hey, do you all have other ideas? We're 50% committed to the budget that was allotted to us. We're talking about a whole, you were right, Dr. Birdsong, we could very well have to write a new RFP.
So,
if we go back that far.
Mr. Jordan, go ahead.
yeah, so I think I share Mr. Clanton's perspective in the opportunity to. So I have warring things on my shoulder. So from an engineering perspective, that's what I was going to ask clarity around, because as I was looking at the timeline, my understanding was that it had been determined, and that as you were talking about the educational labs, that it was going to be a focus around the visual and performing arts based upon the determination that was made. So, but I am aligned with where I thought Mr. Clanton was going about that there's opportunity to refine, grow, and enhance that. But I didn't know what that meant in terms of what you were presenting. So I'm only speaking and only spoke as an individual board member who was looking forward to the recommendation coming back, and that's why I was asking questions. And I've asked them for, I just didn't start asking them. I've been asking them along the way because I was looking forward to that update. So I didn't know that there was, going to be some next steps about voting or anything like that. But I do believe that I'll just repeat, my expectation was that there would be some feedback to the board that this is direction that was headed. And so that's where I was just, and I just want to be clear. Mr. Clanton had a task force. There was different meetings. I would go to different meetings. So I'm not saying that the administration did not do A, B, C, or D.
That was separate from our work, Mr. Jordan.
Well, that was, and I would ask about that because I was trying to get, that's what I was trying to get clarity around, because I couldn't figure out.
Administration's work.
Yeah, the previous principal was working with other entities in the focus on the Academy for the Arts. And that's some of the feedback we got when we were taking notes to create the statement of work. And then we actually created a committee to write the statement of work. And we used the notes from previous administrations once. And it was about an Academy of the Arts.
So I just, what I was trying to get the board to do was just to receive that update and have an understanding of where we were going. And I remain there, but I am excited about the possibility of enhancements if that can be done within the current structure and
We have heard a lot of
scope.
feedback about the ability to incorporate STEAM learning in this academy. The A in STEAM is arts. So having that integrated makes a lot of sense, and certainly, I think, falls into the confines of what we've been scoped to do with this study. So I'm perfectly happy with that direction. But if this question becomes, what kind of academy should Booker T. Washington be?
Yeah.
Different.
And it's wide open, that's a very different study
It is.
than what
Yeah.
we've been asked to do and what
Yes.
we've started doing.
So on the 19th, the vote will be on whether to continue this effort, or
Or do
what
you
is
just
it
need
exactly?
direction? Do you want the administration, the vote will be to reaffirm what the administration believed, what we were tasked with doing, which was going back to the community, and with a focus on the existing specialty program and how we can enhance that program, make it more relevant, engaging as a citywide program for NPS, and bringing that feedback to the board. Now, if it's or, do you want to start from scratch and have it wide open to say, what do you want at Booker T. Washington? Because as Mr. Ross just
fair
stated, that's
to
a
the children.
different
Yeah.
scope of work.
It's how do we enhance?
Yeah.
That's not.
Well, I mean, that's not, also not in line with the resolution and what
Well,
we're charged to do.
and that's why I wanted to meet to have that clarification about
Go
this
ahead.
topic.
I'm just going to say quickly, thank you for this update. I'm just sitting here listening about past, I don't know, what was assumed, resolutions and things like that. I think we need to stay the course, but just be very clear what the work is for the administration. I do appreciate the timeline. I do think if that was something that was presented to the board beforehand, maybe, we could kind of follow along with you all, and there wouldn't be any kind of questions about these public meetings, and it would be clearly defined. I'm just saying, but I really appreciate the timeline. I'm always for a timeline. So thank you for that, but I do believe we need to stay the course and move forward. But again, I'm just hoping everyone is clear around this table what the expectation is and, the end result. So, yeah, I support continue to move forward.
Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Bassine, go ahead.
I support moving forward was just defined and explained. I do have a point of well, at least from my understanding, I'd like to know a little more about the steering committee that is, I've heard a little bit about it, but I'm not very clear on, so they've already begun the work, they've already begun meeting, is my understanding, or not yet?
We've had one meeting.
Okay.
We disseminated some information, asked them a few vision-type questions.
Okay.
We've shared the virtual tours document with them, but it is primarily focused on visual and performing arts and STEAM application.
And STEAM application, okay.
Well, it will be now.
What?
Yes.
Yeah.
We're going to continue that.
Continue that.
It needs to be integrated because that's how you bring arts alive,
Yeah,
is through the application of the arts.
right.
And in a number of the conversations we engaged in, they want to develop the CTE programming, so it's around development of music, recording of music,
The digital,
you know,
right.
and the arts, and
The
they've made
arts,
that
right.
clear.
Yeah.
And, you know, I can't speak for Dr. Pohl or Ms. Goshen, but we certainly plan on engaging.
And the program is expecting it to be school-wide, right? Or not necessarily?
Well, like I
This
said,
is
we're
special.
early in that.
Yeah, you're early in
part
that
of
stage.
conversation,
Okay.
so
Well, I don't want to confuse
mean,
with
once
that,
we get
but
the ed
but
plan-
the steering committee is going to be, is working, they're meeting together, meeting to work out some of these
yes.
things.
And,
Okay.
and we invited a very large group of people. We used our community staff as well as HBA has subcontractors that are assisting with media.
Okay.
I mean, there was a broad net of recruitment done to engage many people in the steering committee, and we got a healthy number of respondents, and we're working with that group.
Okay, thank you very much. We're way over time, so, but we appreciate this. We've been waiting for this for a while, so thank you very much for the work that you've been doing, and I look forward to hearing more about how, as it progresses. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, up next, we have Dr. Pohl with our policy,
I promise to be brief.
our policy updates to
right.
consider for the business meeting.
Good evening, Madam Chair, Dr. Barton, Vice Chair, Ms. Buffalo, members of the board, and Dr. Birdsong. This afternoon's or evening's policy review consists of part of the February VSBA updates. Most policies have just slight language updates, legal reference updates, or cross-references that were updated. Just bring your attention to a couple of the policies. BG, board staff communications and the regulation for this policy. The policy has language updates to match the VSBA model policy. Along with this policy recommendation, the regulation has also been updated to identify the superintendent's official designee during the superintendent's leave of absence as the contact for the school board. Policy GAB-IIBEA and its counterpart IIBEA-GAB, acceptable computer use, which adds newer technologies to the lists as well as language about users of the system agreeing to indemnify the school board for any losses, costs, or damages for violating the policy or guidelines. Policy GCBB, supplementary pay, just removes the line about contracts being separate since the paragraph actually starts with that same line. The VSBA saw that language change. GCPB is the resignation of staff members. Adds that disciplinary action for teachers who breach a contract may now also include written reprimand and suspension as action items that may be taken by the board instead of just revocation of a license. LI is the last one of comment where relations with Educational Accreditation Agency. It updates the policy to update the program name for the recognitions that was formerly in the program. Thanks for allowing me to share these updates as briefly as possible. I'm here for questions you may have.
Awesome, thank you. Go ahead, Ms. Basine, then Mr. Jordan. Anyone else?
I know, that was so fast, I wasn't sure whether we were interjecting. So I'll be quick with my questions. So, IJD, College and Career Readiness, are there regulations to go with that, or are we required to?
There are no requirements for regulations for
There's no
IJD.
requirement for regulations? Is that something that you all talked about in policy committee about having them at all, or are we just because that's, the reason I thought of that is because as it relates to compiling this, or however you're gonna do the CCRI, is it helpful or not helpful? I don't know.
So I think we have enough practices in place and,
Okay.
and procedures in place that we're following through with that full policy.
Okay, all right. And then, the school activity funds, I didn't understand the cafeterias piece, like where we would be doing that, but that's a minor, I don't understand. That seemed a little odd, but is,
And what policy number was that? I'm sorry.
that's DCG, school
DCG.
activities, school activity funds.
DCG, the change in there.
Or is that specific to us?
Oh, it's specific to just, the policy now includes if there's like cafeteria funds, so it's a cafeteria fund policy. It's not specific to our budget at all.
Oh, okay, all right.
And that was based off the Code of Virginia change, I believe.
Oh, okay, all right. And then board staff communications, BG, I thought, just based on the conversations that we've had with our board norms, I guess this is more of a question for the board. I just kind of felt like it seemed a little contradictory to what we established in our norms, so I don't know if it's something that needs to go back and be looked at again, but it seemed to open up communication was allowed between like bypassing the superintendent. So
The regulation is very specific.
I did see the
accompanying
regulation.
Yeah.
So, and I still, I felt like the regulation didn't seem to align with the policy because it was talking about communication in an emergency versus just communication in general. So those were the two things that I felt like didn't quite match up. So I don't know if I don't know if it was just me, but
We need to put the word non-emergency. We can add that word to the policy or to the regulation.
Yeah,
talked a lot about
when that was reviewed, the policy itself talks about just how should communication
Right.
go.
and the
with-
regs talk about in
And
an
the
emergency.
regulations
Yeah.
pretty clear about it used to have a long list of you
People.
can
People you
contact
had to go to.
anybody in
Right.
here.
That out.
But Dr. Birdsong's really good about, here's a designee.
Right.
And this is your contact in an emergency and her leave of
Right.
absence.
Right.
So we felt they were pretty well aligned with,
Absolutely.
because the policy is VSBA recommended policy that
Yep.
follows the legal
Right, I get the,
needs.
okay. But then we have our norms,
Yeah.
which
I didn't-
say
yeah.
something different. I don't know who's on the policy committee anymore, but
I reviewed it. I reviewed the policy. I'm not on the committee, but I did review the policy. And initially, when I first read it, I was like, it kind of gives you a little leeway. But then after I read it again, I thought, no, this is pretty much in alignment. And then the regulation is
Right.
pretty
Very
specific. But
Yeah.
I don't mind to do another look before we go for our vote, just to, take another look. But I'm comfortable with the way that it is, and I feel like our norms are our norms, and I think the regulations along with the policy are very clear.
And I believe that during our governance training, we spent some time on that, and I think we were pretty clear in, the existing structure that we have. It works for us, but our policy needed to reflect that, which is why, and the regulation, which is why I made the changes to the regulation. And I think that regulation could be used by any superintendent because it takes out positions, as position titles may change, as superintendents change. It's just very general about a designee, and just the chain of communication, especially when there's an emergency situation. So I firmly believe that it's aligned with what we talked about during governance training, and it aligns with how we operate right now, which is what I felt like during governance training, everybody agreed, but we needed to look at our policy and regulation, especially the regulation, to align it to what we believe to be the right thing.
Okay.
And sitting, and had looked at this in the policy committee, really, again, this is external. This is letting other individuals know how to effectively communicate with the board, with the superintendent. And then again, the regulations really get into the nuts and bolts of how to do it. So I believe with the red line and what was being presented here, again, is in alignment with what Dr. Birdsong was saying, was making it more high-level general, taking out specific names that were in there, because
Yeah, that
every
makes
year
sense.
annually, the board approves the designees for which the superintendent
Right.
presents to us. So it's,
that part makes sense
yeah.
to me.
So
but
I
it's the
think, and it's letting folks know that as a board, we welcome feedback. We're gonna get emails, we're gonna get people calling us, we're gonna get all those things down there, but there is a protocol that we have in place for them. So that's what when I perceived this here, that it was in alignment, and again, it came from the SBA as a standard one.
My recommendation was going to be, or request, that we revisit it as part of the next governance training session, just to make sure that it is aligned. I had the same reaction, that I thought that it might be a contradiction, but if there's no sense of urgency around it, and there can be an opportunity to align it, I'd like to ask the board to consider that.
Oh, and out of our governance training, and I will say this, sitting on the committee, I have no problem with taking that extra step to ensure that when we get to this particular policy at a point, that we all can be comfortable and vote on it. That, Madam Chair, we send it back, and that we give it, when we get to the board communication, that we can look at this policy and make sure that it's in alignment with how we're framing it. I don't have a problem with that, because I believe that it's not really ruffling anything, but if it's an extra step that we can do to get board consensus around it, I don't have a problem.
Can I ask a
Any
clarifying
opposition?
question?
Go ahead.
Is this around the policy or the regulation?
But the regulation is
The
one,
policy
right?
is, I'm looking at the policy,
So you-
so.
okay, I just wanted to make
The
sure.
policy is what we voted
Yeah,
on.
you
Right,
guys.
correct.
Right, so just one example of where I was concerned. So, like, it says that the board welcomes the viewpoints of the employees and allows time at its meetings for employees to be heard. So if we're really saying that during the public comment portion of the business meeting, that's what we mean, then I think we can be specific. But I think when you leave it general and just says that we allow this at our meetings, we're having a meeting now, but we wouldn't allow it. So I just think that just to make sure that we are aligned and in sync and clear is important.
So we would have to make sure, cross-reference, because we have a policy that
Yeah.
states specifically about public comment.
Yeah.
Right.
So, if we're gonna have, just to make sure it's alignment, we don't wanna have conflicting policies. And so I believe that this policy, the way it is right now, doesn't conflict with the other one, because the other one specifies public comment. But again, like I was saying, Madam Chair, I don't have a problem sending the committee for us to take into the governance training, and so we can all get together and be on the same page. I'm all for it.
I mean, that's fine. I think it's a good discussion.
Mm-hmm.
So, we can table it until, what are we, so, until May. I mean, we could still vote on it in May.
Okay.
All right? The grand finale. We're adjourned.
5 minutes.